Hello,
everyone.
there
Hello,
we
Grant.
are.
Hello, Adrian. It's good to have you back.
Hello, Dennis. Hello,
Hello,
Grant.
Thomas. Hello, LinkedIn
Hello,
user.
LinkedIn user. This, which is not Thomas
It's
one, it is Thomas two.
there's a
Yeah,
high chance it's one of the Thomases.
we will get into problems when we have more than 5 Thomases.
I just wanted to have a countdown. We didn't have a countdown in a long time in that manner, and I didn't have any up-to-date clips. We have a lot of clips. I've been polishing up my Descript skills, and I've been clip cutting this weekend. So we are getting a lot of cool clips, especially from the last episode with Brian, with Mark. Mark
We have
hopefully is joining
actually
us
quite a
early
lot of stuff still in the backlog.
in the pipeline. Yeah.
It is basically not in a continuous delivery manner how we create clips, to be
No, the
honest.
clips not. The clips
No,
not. I
clips are
wish.
not.
I wish.
It's more like Git flow.
If there's any YouTube magicians out there who have some continuous clip making pipeline ideas, let us know. But definitely, there's a lot of human involved. There's a lot of human right now in our clipping strategy.
Oh,
Um,
look, Grant does have a drinking driven development.
the drinking during development. Wait,
Yeah.
isn't there an XKCD on what is it? Is it the Balmer peak? The Balmer peak, right? So like it's the right level of blood alcohol concentration where you're like super productive as a developer, whatever. And this is water, okay?
This is water, and this
This
other stuff is coffee, not wine. Yeah.
I'm
In the first days, when I was
since yeah,
talking to Dennis, I was completely distracted every time he was drinking wine while he was talking to me. And then he told me that it's actually coffee, but it's basically a big wine glass. Yeah.
it's a cognac glass.
Cognac.
It's a
Well,
fine
it's
cognac.
not better, right?
No.
It's not better.
Okay. So, for those of you who don't know, we're celebrating on the Thursday tracks, TDD February. Also, February is my birthday, so that's also one of the reasons. So usually when I publish books and booklets, I do it on February for my birthday because that's when I have the most motivation. So last year I published a TDD booklet, and this year for February I want to sort of revise it. So leading up to the release of the new relaunch of the booklet, I'm doing a lot of research, and I'm really rewriting, polishing, and condensing all of the new TDD knowledge I gained, and all of the new TDD knowledge that you guys helped me sort of distill, based on your feedback, based on your reactions, based on your reposts, based on your questions, based on the new information that you gave to me that I then went and um, dug through and sort of researched in more detail. I then sort of proofread them and sort of polish them and make them sexy and republish my little booklet. And you've been if you've been a subscriber, you were able to sort of see parts of that progress on my newsletter. Part of test writing for today's topic, since we're to give you some context, whole point of TDD February is that we are having Thursday tracks for TDD. Hey Jeff, thanks for joining. Jeff, do let me know. We have pairing with you planned as well. I got your code, and we still need to give you the studio link. Just remind me to get to that. We're going to do some quick theoretical intro first, and then we can jump in. If you want, you can do Jeff before Mark, and once we get a timestamp from Mark, then we can sort of deal with the
Wasn't
logistics.
Mark planned for 16
Yeah,
CET?
no, Mark was planned for 17 CET, so in an hour, so on the
17, right?
halfway, yeah, on
Yeah.
the halfway point, and I said to Jeff either before or directly after. I'm gonna do a quick intro on TDD on today's topic on structure independence and behavior. So to give you some context, to have an idea of where we're headed with this sort of long term, episode 1 on the Thursday tracks for TDD February was just basics, basically giving you a refresher on what TDD is, what TDD isn't, primarily the idea of a testing plan, because Kent Beck did sort of come out and sort of refresh this idea of, hey, yeah, like writing down the plan is like really important. So that's what he calls canonical TDD, according to him. So there was that aspect, and then there was the aspect of the modern tools. So continuous test runners, specifically like vtest, like just watch. Like last time you saw me use just in a mode where it watches the file, right? So it doesn't even depend on my IDE or me to run the tests. The tests are just constantly running as I'm typing them. Now, Jest has its own problems because sometimes it won't rerun correctly when it transpiles from TypeScript, which is a whole problem of its own. But that's basically the sort of more modern style of writing tests. Because usually you would have to write tests and then run them manually. So alt tab to something and run them manually. And that in itself also carries friction that a lot of practitioners or non-practitioners sort of objected to. It's like, oh, I hate this alt tabbing and hitting enter on run tests. Especially if you're in a PHP, a sort of PHP developer, that tooling is still not very ergonomic. So I feel
What do you use for TDD in PHP? Actually, I don't use PHP
I'm
anymore.
a I use a mix of PHP unit and Codeception. Those seem to be sort of the most middle of the ground to cover acceptance tests and unit tests. But then I have to use it in PHP Storm because PHP Storm has a plugin that continuously runs them as I'm typing. Because PHP unit doesn't have a test watcher.
Good old PHP Storm.
Good old PHP is still not. I mean, unfortunately,
so what is
the
PHP Storm for me? It's exactly $100 more expensive than WebStorm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, no, it's actually when you buy your DataGrip license, it's basically the same. So
I mean, yeah, once you buy DataGrip, you're done. You're all in, and you should probably just buy all of them. So I have Goland, PHP Storm, and WebStorm because that's
the most freelancers I know have the Ultimate Edition, so they don't care. They just download what they have at them.
Yeah, I don't. I sometimes don't code. You know, there have been moments where I just do other stuff and I just don't code for a year, and I feel bad for like paying so many SaaS licenses that I just feel crazy sometimes. So anyway, back to TDD. So the first episode was just about modern basics, modern tooling specifically, and what TDD is, and refreshing this idea. Today's episode is about the output, the tests that you write, and what really sucks, right? So today is about us talking about this idea of, I tried TDD, I followed the rules, I did write the test plan, I did red green refactor, and now a week has passed and my code sucks. I want to do some things and my tests
only
are
a week.
At me.
Whoa.
Yeah, so now a week has passed and my tests are screaming at me, or I made a change and the tests fail and they shouldn't, or whatever, or my team doesn't like the way I wrote the tests, or it sometimes fails, sometimes doesn't, right? So once you get good with TDD, it's still not. You're still not at the finish line. The finish line is actually understanding the whole test automation philosophy, the whole test automation toolkit that goes into it, the skill set that goes into it, and is to able to eyeball, regardless of whether a test was written with TDD or not, to look at the qualities that TDD provides for test writing. And not all of them are automatic. TDD only helps with some of them. And today's episode is to look into, and again, based on research from Kent Beck, is to look into what are the qualities of good tests. So it's not specific TDD, but it is about test automation, specifically the unit test kind of test automation. We're not talking about end-to-end tests. That is a whole problem on its own. And that's today. Now, next week is about TDD on the front end with React in an enterprise application context, because we have Nick Shoemaker coming on, and he's an expert in that. So if you have any front end React TDD questions, next week, like you can post them now. I'll aggregate them in a list, and then once we get everything covered for the next show,
that would be interesting. That would be really interesting.
And then the last week will be all about the business context. So we're slowly going from beginner to experienced developer to enterprise level React to business benefits. So the last episode will be all about business benefits. How to
I have a lot to say about that.
Perfect. So the
learn the hard way.
Learn the hard way. Awesome. So I'm just gonna share my screen on the Desiderata real quick. So I will drop the link in chat for those of you who wanna check it. So it's kentbeck.github.io. It's on his GitHub page. Hang on, I need to open the event because I need for some reason StreamYard doesn't post the LinkedIn when I drop links. I'm very sorry. I have to do this manually.
I can concentrate on your stuff. You send it to me.
Yeah, sorry, I was already 99% there. Oh, there we go.
Okay. No,
I think it worked. I think it worked. Yeah. I don't see myself commenting, so I'm always worried when that happens.
I don't see your comment either. But yeah.
Fair.
Well.
So the test desiderata is. Let me pull it out. The test desiderata is Kent Beck's attempt at a white paper to talk about what makes tests awesome. Right. So the core idea is that good tests that you don't end up hating have a combination of these properties, and these are all the positively worded. So more is better, more isolated, more composable, more deterministic, faster, more writable, more readable, more behavioral, more structure, insensitive, more automated, more specific, more predictive, and more inspiring. Good is better on all of these properties. Now, as far as unit tests are concerned, you probably already know about fast and isolated, right? So in process, or at least running in the same process as the test runner is running, or not more than one. Maybe sometimes your test runner is slightly outside of your actual execution context. In some languages, in Go, there might be an in and outside complexity to the code, but it shouldn't be more than that, right? So it shouldn't spin up like a Kubernetes cluster to run your tests. Like that would not be isolated. But it's okay if it's like running inside one image, one Docker image, but then it doesn't really spin up any other ones. It doesn't control any new ones. That would then be more in the end-to-end integration, platform engineering oriented, like DevOps oriented tooling, and readable. Yes. So I don't want to go through all of these because you can go through all of these, and these are basically covering a lot of different complexities. And each link of these, by the way, there are 12 of these. If you click one of them, it goes to a YouTube video, like a 10-15 minute YouTube video with Kent Beck and Kelly Sutton, and the two of them are pair programming on a Ruby example. So it's really down to earth, right? So this isn't any rocket science. The hard part is actually enforcing these tests in real life and on a real project. Like that's the hard part, because you can see there's like 12 different properties. It's hard to really follow and really focus on all 12 properties at the same time while you're writing tests. Now, Adrian, why is 3D good?
I forgot. No, I don't. I haven't. So I think there are many reasons, right? And probably what I would answer first is, or what a person would answer first is always a little bit different. So people have probably different motivations and motives why they do that. But for me, it's two things. Two things are very important. And the one thing, both actually, as I said, were, let's say, learnings of my past when I haven't executed. So I was very late with testing, to be honest. And the first one I would say is, or the most important one is, to think about what you actually need to do. And the point is, especially, I read this, I think a week ago on LinkedIn, was a person who said, if you don't know what your requirements are, you don't need to test because you don't know it yet, which is totally wrong, because if you don't know what you type now, you can't type. Yes. So it basically doesn't make sense. So you start with something, and if you don't know what you want to do, then you start and say, okay, what do I need to do? So what is the goal here? Why should I do this? How can I improve? Have I thought about everything? Do I need to consult one? someone before I actually can start to write my code. And this is so your first iteration should be your test. So it should be basically covered by the test. And it must not be the finished feature, it must be this. And what I saw very often, let's say, with my own doing or with the doing of my own engineers over the last, let's say, 15 years, when you don't do that, people tend to rush. And I called that, I call that oftentimes not software development, but software rushing. And this is very often something you see in agency type of work, and we have that still. I don't like it very much, to be honest. So I don't want, again, want to get rid of that stuff because this is very anti-testing friendly environment, let's say.
Sure.
But especially when it comes to those situations where you need to think about how you want to actually do something, how do you want to iterate and stuff like that, and how would I like to isolate my stuff? Because if you, for example, you are in a component-driven framework like a React environment somewhere, right? And you need to think about what you do, then you already start to think, when I write my test for my first component, do I really need to have this and this and this and this in this test already? So you become like, I had this in the Tailwind stuff as well. An upper ceiling of complexity applies here as well. So you try to, because you need to write a test, you try to make it as simple as possible so that you can be sure that you cover it. As simple as possible does mean as close as possible to the quality, which is the requirement. So you need to meet the requirement, which is the quality. So this is actually a great tool to think, how can I get as a straight way direct to the quality and not above and not below and not somewhere else. And somewhere else is what I saw often in my past, or we still have technical debt because of that. And the second aspect is, of course, the confidence you have. Of course, when you start a project, it seems like, especially when you are in this prototype thinking, you build something and you think, oh, it's great, I've built it, it runs great. And after half a year or year, there are so many changes into that system. Maybe you duplicate the entire code base, you try to make a multi-tenant system out of that, you start to, scale that on some point in some direction. It doesn't even matter if you scale it vertically or horizontally. And the problem here is really that you can't even refactor. You can't make changes. You can't change entire parts without being completely afraid to do that.
And that's
right?
tricky. And that's one of the... Was there more you wanted to say? Sorry, I immediately jumped in on an idea I got.
I forgot already what I wanted to say.
I'm sorry. I often do this.
But it's like this. So it is about the confidence. So on some point you need to change things, and it's not about this particular part of the application and this particular application. Some or most of the times you have multiple applications in a company. That's the reality. So most companies or most teams working on not only one thing, and you have several things, and on some point there are new, let's say, requirements or change requests coming from somewhere in parallel. And then you need to deliver, and you are, let's say, you are hesitant to deliver because you are not confident anymore. So you start to postpone here, postpone there. You start to stack up things. You start to create cold smells. You have to everywhere the to-dos, right? You don't actually work them down. You know you need to change something, but you can't. And then you skip it again. You build up on that. On some point, you have the big ball of mud. So this is actually how the big ball of mud is coming into being. So this is basically, its best friend of the big ball of mud is to not test your code.
Yeah.
This is
like
how
if you apply the quotes we mentioned last week from Marco Mosi, inverted thinking, right? So how can I make my code base terrible? You just don't write tests for it. You couple everything unnecessarily, and you really make it difficult for anybody who comes in to write any kind of test. Or
if you have a test, you have your inputs, you have your output, so you need to isolate it already. And especially when you write components, it is the same with objects and methods, but I'm so used to components in the last years. When you do that, and I see it especially for people who are not taking too much care about the code. It is like that you have those large components where you have multiple ideas, multiple things hidden inside this component already, which consumes from the same APIs, from the same states and all this kind of stuff. But they actually should be isolated, but they aren't, because it's okay, it runs. They test it in integration, in the browser, in the dev mode or in the staging mode or something like that. But in reality, they haven't developed a component in isolation. And that's already basically in that moment when you say you are done and you have written no test, you actually haven't met the quality. And this is something we all should be aware of. You haven't met the quality if you haven't written a test before you have done it. Because even if you do like a test last development or write your test somewhere in the future, it is not the same, because you have started to develop something. You have started to probably, I'm not talking about small buttons or something like that. I talk about real functionality which consumes from other sources as well.
But buttons as well. I wouldn't belittle buttons, but buttons are still code. If you write code to make a button, then you can test cover it. If there is behavior to the button, right? If there is behavior to where the button is located, if it's not.
Yeah, but my point was more about that button is by its definition very isolated already. But components which are, let's say, if we take the atomic design.
So let's dial it back a bit, right? So why is TDD helpful? Why is TDD helpful compared to test last? Right. So if I am already writing test automation, what can I benefit from TDD? Right, so the point with TDD is that it naturally creates forcing functions in your workflow that forces you to make your tests more isolated, more deterministic, and more readable. Right, so you get the. I mean, it doesn't make it more automated. I think the automated quality is a little bit binary, like this one.
It is. Yeah. If it's not running automated, it is not automated, right?
It doesn't. But the point is that TDD helps you get some of these qualities for free if you do them before the implementation, more than if you were to do it test last. Because let's face it, if you are going to write a test to a high degree of discipline, there's no reason why you wouldn't do it before the code. No reason, other than some kind of personal resistance to this idea of doing TDD or test first. And really, the important aspect is test first, right? So that we're not biased with the implementation, because if we write the implementation first before we have defined and written down the behavior, it will make our tests much more structure sensitive, because our brain is already primed and biased for the implementation. Right?
And you have just said something very important. It is the idea of, or I don't know if you've said that, but it sounded like that. It is about saving time. So if you think you can save time by not writing a component, not writing a test for your component, for your method or whatever, then you most likely write a prototype of application, which is okay as soon as you don't use it in production, which is actually not the reality.
As long as you throw it away, if you have clear acceptance criteria.
Most people don't throw away the prototypes. There is a sunken cost fallacy. This is psychology. People, and you have a business which is pressuring you, right? And this business pressure is always there.
And that kind of development caters towards making stakeholders happy.
Yeah.
And then if you make stakeholders happy by moving fast, by neglecting quality, it will make them short-term happy, but it will undermine the stakeholders' trust in your ability to deliver good software.
Yes, this was my point.
It will make them happy for a week, but it will make them not trust you for a year.
You save 10 to 15 minutes in the beginning, and you waste 1 hour or more for a component in the future, which is actually this is the worst case scenario.
Which is great if you don't plan. Which is great if you don't plan your business to be successful and you just want to make a quick exit. But then if your business is successful, then turning the ship around and putting quality back in is extremely expensive. And it might be the thing that actually kills. Putting the quality back in, the cost of putting quality back in once you've neglected it, might be the thing that actually kills a potentially successful business. Because you've been neglecting it for too long for short-term sort of happiness benefits or for not realizing how important these qualities are. If you're not writing tests, any tests, you can't have these qualities, right?
Yeah.
So another aspect. Wait, we have some questions. Let's respect our intelligent audience. And so Jeff has something very important. And Jeff's code example that he shipped that I have, that I can show you on stream in a bit, follows zombies. So I'm also a huge zombies advocate. I always test the zombies. Zombies helps me more than TPP, for example, which is Uncle Bob's way of testing, which is zombies inspired, but it's not explicit. So I love zombies. Zombies.
Could you
is this
please
idea.
explain quickly
Jeff
what
did.
zombies
Jeff
are
did.
for the audience?
Zombies is basically an acronym that is ZOMBIES, which stands for 0, 1, many, or more complex, B for boundary, I for interface definition, E for exceptional behavior, exceptions, and S for simple scenarios or simple use cases, or just scenarios, right? So that's the zombies. So zombies would be for 99 bottles. 0 is the one where there are no moving parts. It's just static, which would be the last line in the lyrics. Then the 1 would be 1 if. It can be either A or B. So it's either is the last line or it's not the last line. Then the many is the case where you have the 99 to 3. And then you have boundary behaviors, which is what happens at the beginning, what happens at the end. And then there's a few exceptions, which is, I think, the number 3, where the spelling is different and the two boundaries meet. Then there's the interface definition where you refactor, and then there's again, exceptions if there's any, or simple scenarios, which is, maybe some kind of end-to-end test. There are some good things about this, some bad things about this. I don't always go through with the entirety of zombies. Like the zom part of zombies is super helpful. The bees is context dependent. But this is a great rule to follow. If you're a sucker for things like solid and kiss and dry, forget about all of that. Just do zombies on the tests. Like you're saving yourself so much more time. Because it reorganizes, it sort of sorts the problem in your brain by increasing complexity. So you start with the easy stuff first, so that you have something to work with to put the complexity together with.
Don't worry about your brain. The zombies will eat it anyway if you program that, right?
Okay, what does he mean with predictive? Thomas Shaka. So predictive means that the tests passing should give me, the engineer, a high degree of confidence, a feeling of confidence that it will work on production. That's what predictive means. It means that I can predict the state of production based on the state of the test suite. Right? So, for example, tests where the test passes, but you're afraid to deploy, that would be not predictive. Because then you say, yes, the tests pass, but, I still need to test this and this and this and this manually. That's not a very reliable test suite. That's not a very predictive test suite. That's what it means.
I would call it confidence, actually, not predictive.
Yeah. So the confidence of your test suite should instill confidence in your ability to deploy to production.
Yeah.
Brian basically calls this. Brian Finster calls this basically it's what he calls the value of knowing nothing breaks, of value of integration, the value of sort of proving to yourself that you were right about some parts of the requirements. That's one aspect. Because a lot of people who say, I don't want to do TDD, they do so for benevolent reasons. Because they say, I tried TDD, and I wrote a bunch of tests, and then those tests prevented me from making changes, and those tests prevented me from refactoring. That's because those tests were very low on these qualities. Right, so the point is, TDD helps you with some of these, but not all of them. The rest are still on you, the developer. And that's what today's episode is about. The basics of red, green, refactor, they gave you 3 or maybe 4 out of the 12 qualities. The other 8 depends on the brains and the habits and the experience of the developers who basically
and the best thing for everyone in the audience today is Dennis not only needs to talk about this, he needs to prove it today in the second half of the show, together
And I
with
got
Mark Weinberg.
that one is rehearsed. So, and with Jeff and solo. So I'm sorry, this is not as organic as last week. I did rehearse it, so because I'm really passionate about this one. But there was very different, a lot of different aspects to this. But if you want to challenge me, go ahead and challenge me. I would, if you have a good example, I would really love to sort of dig into one of your examples. So that's answered. Zombies, Jeff. Yeah, Jeff mentioned if you don't know your requirements, then you don't need to test. In fact, you should not be writing any code at all. Yes, I agree. Mark is here with us. Hey, Mark. Yes, I had a note to myself about refactoring. So those people who do TDD, who just try TDD out, and then they end up with a bunch of tests that just break their ability to make changes to the system, they have created legacy code with legacy tests, low quality code with low quality tests. That's what we don't want. And if the way you do coding is low quality code with low quality tests, and you happen to follow TDD, the solution is not to drop TDD. Because if you drop TDD, it's very likely you'll just stop writing the low quality tests, which is good. You save some time by not writing the low quality tests, but also the quality of your code base will diminish even faster because, you know, your goal should be to increase the quality of your code base. And what does quality mean? Quality means that you retain a certain degree of optionality. The quality means that you can move fast. Quality means that when your business requirements change, you can only change that which needs to be changed safely without accidental changes, without accidental rewrites. If there's security audits coming along, if there's regulation audits coming along, if you need to bump up the major version of your framework or React or whatever library you're using, that you can do so safely, or at least that you can safely check what would break and how long it would take to fix, so that the code tells you, yeah, like 90% of everything works, this and this needs some attention. And of these two, this one is only critical. And Adrian really knows that part well, right? So that's sort of where you're headed. Like you're thinking about the maturity model of a complex, thriving, cash flow positive, and successful business. We're not using this excuse of, yeah, but we're a unicorn, we're not making any money. If we start writing tests, we'll just run out of money faster. Like, that's not, nobody cares about that, because if you are successful, you will start caring about it, and by that time it will be too late, right? So that story never really makes sense.
We all should have one in mind, and everyone who's telling that writing a test is saving time, it is simply wrong. It is a lie. So you're lying to yourself. This is ego-driven speaking.
Yes.
This is your inner voice. This is this dark little angel above your head telling you you don't need to do that. Yeah. In reality, you know exactly that you need to do that, because the time you waste later is like 10 times more worse than writing the test in the beginning. Why is that? Because it will hit back to you in a time where you don't need it. And this is something very severe. It will not only be hard to maintain, it will bring you to a point when you overextend it, where you don't want to come to work anymore.
Yeah.
So think about that. If this is really worth speeding up your process in the beginning.
The whole idea of testing, of TDD, is human emotion. We're creating code to motivate, to inspire, and to help the engineering team and the engineering org be confident, right? So what do you want before the launch? You want the engineers to be confident that everything works.
Yeah.
That's all that matters. When there's an important launch, when there's an important feature, when there's an important outage, the stakeholders don't care about code quality. They want their people to be confident, to be proud of what they built. If you don't have that, it's because you're probably lacking a test suite that you trust. It's because you're lacking a test suite that shows these qualities. And one of those aspects about how much money you invest into writing tests is actually captured in one of the qualities, which is writable. A code, test should be writable, meaning that the relative cost of writing a test should match the cost of writing the feature. If the feature takes 10 seconds to write, well, you probably shouldn't be writing a test for 2 hours. But if the feature is really expensive, or if it provides a lot of revenue and the feature failing could cause a lot of loss of revenue, or maybe just opportunity cost or potential loss of revenue, then it's worth investing some relative amount of that potential revenue into writing a test. So for example, I once did a whole test suite about simulating 20 players of socket connections onto a central server, because I needed to test the simulation of a 5v5 Dota tournament with at least 4 teams. And I spent a lot of time investing into that, like weeks, because every time we had a feature, it took the entire organization, 15 engineers, 2 full days to test all features. Just one release candidate, the one feature frozen. It took us 2 days to test everything, to guarantee that everything works.
Yeah.
And then if we made a small change, 2 days. Another small change, 2 days, 2 full days, the entire week. We needed 20 laptops. And I said, this is silly. It cost us this much to test, and the features were easy to write. Well, we should invest more into testing so that we can save all the time not having to, manually test on 20 different machines. So I wrote an isolated, writable, deterministic test runner that simulated that environment so that I could test all that in process, so that I could make it composable, make it isolated. We'll talk a little bit more later about what composable means exactly, and about structure independence, which in this case means structure insensitive or structure sensitive, what that means exactly in the testing lingo. So that's what writable means. Fast means that test should run quickly, right? So test should run in the time that it takes you to alt tab to some other application and back. Like that's how fast they should run. So usually lower than 4 seconds, lower than 3 seconds. There are some exceptions here. Sometimes the test suites are just hard to compile, or they might require a lot of disk I/O, like in a large React application. It's very possible that just churning through all of the compilation steps requires a lot of work. That is a constant challenge, especially on front end. So I am personally VTest is handling that really well. But the ecosystem is getting better and better and better. We had a few questions as well. Are tests a kind of documentation of the underlying code too?
Yeah,
I would say yes, but also no. So the tests ideally shouldn't be, and this has to do with structure sensitivity, right? The tests ideally shouldn't be documenting how something is implemented. That should still be a comment inside the implementation of the code.
But it should document the component.
But it should document the expected behavior of a component, right? So it should really, your tests should match or even be a better form of documentation than your Jira board, than your Agile board, than your Sprint board, than your backlog.
You need to have a documentation of the governance in between all objects and all things you have, the behavior of the user stories, all that kind of stuff must be in some form documented. Where to start, and on those kind of things. But when it comes to how your thing you build right now is actually working, so let's call it just component in a more high level sense. You build something which is isolated, and you need to have some form of documentation about that. And I wouldn't create something external, because there's a big chance that it is out of sync. And your test, especially if you practice TDD, is not out of sync. And this really helps you. And if it's not fully documented, you have forgot tests.
Yes.
So it is this, I would say, yes, for this component, it is a valid documentation. It is not a substitution for the entire documentation of your application.
Yeah, you should still have documentation in the form of architecture, decision records, things that are very hard to express in an isolated test. architecture, business reasons, business context, user feedback.
Yeah.
That should all be documented. The
Exactly.
backlog is a good example. Conversations, meeting minutes. Having interviewing 10 users and then having the statistical breakdown of what works and what doesn't, and having documentation of, we want this feature to behave like this because some of our users are expecting this and this and this. So the reasons why, that should be documented externally to the code. But then the understanding of, from now on, this component needs to also display this behavior. That should be a test, ideally.
50 minutes until we see Mark Weinberg live. Just saying.
15.
15.
Yeah.
Just
15.
for you and your time schedule.
Awesome. So that's one question from one of the Thomases. They do become that if the code base is well tested, new programmers could read them and understand how it works. Yeah, so the test should ideally show you a very good code snippet of like how to compose things together, especially in object-oriented use cases. They should be examples of composability, right? So it should be composable, and I have a good example of what that means. I also have a bad example of what that means.
Explain what that means.
Explain what that means?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just drop the comment. What composable means is that there should be dimensions to my code. So, for example, when I'm describing a checkout, a cart on e-commerce on a website, it's plausible to have this idea of, I go to the catalog, I add a product, the product goes into my cart, the cart has a certain cost or price, and I have a certain address, and I add my address, and I save my address as my primary shipping location, and then I go to checkout, and when I click this, I expect this amount to be on the credit card. So composability means that I just had to describe like 20 different dimensions of detail. And what composability means is that, I can probably put together each matrix independently based on all permutations of the code base, right? So maybe I can pay with Visa, or I can pay with MasterCard, or I can pay with PayPal. I can buy a digital product or a physical product. Those are 2 dimensions. Ideally, I should only have like 5 tests. That's composability. Is that I am testing each dimension individually and separately from the other dimensions. Worst case scenario, when our tests not composable, when your tests require you to have a Cartesian product of all combinations.
Yep.
Right. So in the 99 bottles kata, the worst thing you can do to not make your test composable is to have 200 different tests, one for each line in the challenge. Because the 99 bottles lyrics follow 4 or 5 composable rules. So all the behavior is expressible with 5 tests. And then those tests can be composed together. And the behavior that those tests guarantee can also be composed together. That's the idea of composability, is that you don't do this Cartesian product thing of I can press button B and then this happens, and I can press button A and this happens. And I can be a real user, and I can be an admin user impersonating another user. So I shouldn't now have this Cartesian product of real user clicks A, real user clicks B, impersonated user clicks A, and impersonated user clicks B. I should rather express, what does it mean when an impersonated user does this action? What does it mean when a real user does this action? And what does it mean to do action A by any user? And what does it mean to do function B when you meant to do button B by any user? But then those things should be composable in a way that they don't require like deep code path traversal for the whole like combinatorial spectrum of the tests. This is what people usually get most upset about, is that when their tests are not composable, they're like set up for like how to set up the code. They put one entity into the database and another one, and then they do these like DB unit tests with like heavy fixtures, and then they have 40,000 different entities in the database, and they have it just set up just right to have like all permutations that they can possibly imagine, and then they have to add a new rule. Oh, on Sundays in Germany we have a discount for like these 7 users, and then everybody's like, no, all my tests, like which ones are now failing accidentally, which ones are failing because of new behavior, I don't know. And when they're not composable, it just becomes this lethargic mess of, oh my god, some of my tests might now be passing incorrectly, some of my failing tests might be failing incorrectly, and I need to write all of the new tests which should now be failing because I'm about to implement new behavior. And that sucks. Nobody wants to be in that position. And that's the equivalent of having like low quality legacy tests when they're not composable, when they're just too tightly coupled together. The same way that you can write shit code, you can write shit test code. And usually it's the composability quality that most hinders your ability to write code, because you didn't understand the behavior, because you didn't make your test behavioral, right? So making your tests less behavioral also makes them less composable. These are linked.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good point.
That's the idea here. And structure sensitive is then the other part, which is something in my implementation might have an implicit guarantee. So for example, if I use a short instead of a long, I might have a rollover of certain numbers, and there might be something in my implementation relying on that behavior that has never been documented or requested by the customer, but it's there and it's cute and it's nice and it's sort of somebody benefits from that. And then if I refactor it to a long or a big int, something breaks.
This is what Jeff said. Comments in the code should document why and how.
Yeah, but it's very murky, right? So it's, if you're coming from the stance of all I ever saw were structure sensitive tests, I wouldn't necessarily understand what the distinction means. If all I ever saw were uncomposable tests, I wouldn't necessarily understand what this means, right? So I have to see the good and the bad to really understand why this matters. And I really need to care why this matters. Some software bugs have killed people. Yeah, Jeff has a good point. They have. You can have a bug in your braking system in your car, and cars have a lot of software, millions upon millions of lines of code in your car, governing, electric usage, gas distribution.
I think what's more common, I know that's an extreme example, but what is actually a severe example, not an extreme, but a severe one, is that bugs can cause traumas for people. So if you have too many of them in your system and you don't get out of that anymore, you might end up in a burnt out situation. I saw that oftentimes.
Yeah, but I also saw bugs in like MRI machines where the coils electrocuted someone because it like bypassed some safety feature. Like that can all happen. Like engineers are, this is not to be taken lightly.
Yeah, so I would say both physical and mental injuries.
Yeah.
Can happen
or
because
financial.
of
You can accidentally transfer somebody's money and in a irreversible way, and it'll have a huge physical and mental and emotional toll on.
Let's agree on we don't accept bugs in the system.
Yeah, if your business is a serious business where you care about your code, you should also care about writing tests. If you don't care about writing tests, it's possible you also don't care about the feature you're about to implement.
Let's go through.
But this decision should be made by an engineer, not the business who doesn't understand tests.
Denise, let's go through the comments because you only have 5 minutes left.
Okay.
Good.
Grant mentions, I used to have a massive build every application and client every night. It ran for 5 hours every night, build, compile, test, deploy, maybe 160 applications. It ran for 17 years, but you always know you can open the project and work on it no matter how long since you last worked on it. Yeah, that's a good point. Like if you have a very sturdy test suite that you trust, it instills confidence, then you're set up. Even if it's slow, right? It doesn't matter if it's fast. Like fast is only one of the qualities, right? So and Kent even acknowledges this. Like some properties interfere with each other. Making tests more predictive of production behavior makes them slower. This is why people like end-to-end tests, right? Is that the more I test it in a production-like environment, like actual production or staging or something similar to staging, it'll give me more confidence. But also, end-to-end tests are notoriously sort of architecture sensitive. If your architecture is shit, you will need to write end-to-end tests. You have nothing else, or just test in production, like Brian mentioned last week.
The problem with end-to-end tests is you really
they're expensive to maintain. They are not composable. They are not deterministic. They are not specific.
They are always requiring everything, and you only want to test an atomic thing. And the point is, if you, for example, have problems with the API right now, so it's slow, sometimes breaking, you simply can't test what you want to test.
Yeah.
So it is not really for TDD, in my opinion.
The problem end-to-end tests are expensive is that they're really good for regression and nothing else. And regression is the last thing you want to use tests for, because you want to use tests to drive your implementation, to drive refactoring, to make refactoring cheap, to make refactoring confident, to make refactoring predictable. That's what you want. The problem with end-to-end tests is that they are structure sensitive. They are sensitive to the infrastructure. They are sensitive to the credentials. They are sensitive to the data. They are sensitive to the whole ecosystem of how you're running them. Even the test runner, even like what time of day it is, what time zone you're in, what browser you're using, what extensions the browser has installed. And they're not isolated, which means that the order in which you run them might make them a little bit unpredictable or murky, which, again, it then kills determinism. It definitely kills speed, and they're not specific. When an end-to-end test passes, it tells you, okay, no regressions. But when an end-to-end test fails, it doesn't immediately tell you why. You will always second guess, wait, it failed. Because it's not isolated. Now you need to question everything that is not isolated. Okay, but did it fail for the right reason, or did it fail because I forgot something, or did it fail because I didn't build something, or did it fail because I forgot a credential, or did it fail because I didn't run my migrations, or did it, right? When it's not isolated and it fails, you will start questioning everything that is not isolated. That's why end-to-end tests are so expensive to maintain. They are expensive time-wise, brain power-wise, because they require a lot of process, a lot of second guessing, and they won't provide a lot of confidence. But they are better in a shit architecture with like very, very questionable practices. They are better than nothing. And at the end of the day, if you don't have any tests, you're always testing in production. Somebody is testing in production. And that's a good starting point. And Brian gave us a lot of good tips about how to bridge that gap last week. Grant mentioned skills improve with repetition. No one is born with the ability to play the violin. Exactly. I mean, if your tests suck, then you shouldn't stop doing TDD. Instead, you should figure out, okay, I'm doing TDD. How am I doing on these metrics? And then improve one of them. Solid, dry, KISS won't help you with any of these metrics. You need to understand these metrics to really write good quality tests. That's kind of the point of today's topic.
Come on, next one. I will give you all comments now. Stop monologuing now.
Yeah, tests are typically mostly examples of what the system should do. I wouldn't say examples. I think they should be requirements of what the system should do. If you have a test that is, a wish, like maybe it should do this, I don't think that's a good test. The test should definitely say the system should do this, and it should not do this.
This is a little bit what Storybook is doing, right? Mm-hmm. It is a little bit. It is like testing, so people often refer Storybook to testing, UI testing.
It's Gherkin for web components, for React components.
Yeah, and Storybook tells you how you can implement things. So
it's also heavy. It's heavy. Like it just brings this huge pipeline into the mix, and I think that's what people object to most. Same thing with Tailwind, right? Tailwind is like, wow, I'm super productive with Tailwind, but then people say, yeah, but I have to learn all this. I need the cheat sheet, and I need my HTML. I scroll right all the time, right? So people object because of like silly reasons to certain pipeline or procedural side effects. I know you're very passionate about Tailwind. This is not a jab. Stop monologuing.
Okay, we have someone in backstage, and we're bringing now to backstage. To stage, and I hope. No, don't hope. I'm pretty sure we get a warm welcome, and then we're getting straight into what we've stopped last. Or let's say last. Was it last week? Yeah, I think it was last week, right?
It was last week, yes.
Yeah, 99 bottles. We're going back into 99 bottles and finishing it today, I hope. Let's have Mark Weinberg here. Hello, Mark. How are you?
Hello, Mark.
Hello, good to see everyone. It's also good to hear a German pronounce my name.
Because
Mark
it's a German name.
Weinberg. It is a German name.
Actually came from
Adrian,
Russia.
ironically, doesn't have a German surname.
Well, I'm back in
He's
my
Dutch
normal
on it.
environment here. We have fiber back. They actually unplugged us by accident at 10,000 feet away, and they unplugged our fiber cable to my house. So
You jinxed me too. The next day on Friday, I also lost
sorry.
my fiber. So I was without fiber in one of
I
my
have at home, because I'm so dependent on internet connection because of my job. Obviously, I have a Starlink antenna, and it's a dish. It's very good actually. It is better than my cable.
I lived on Starlink for a year out here. Also important, and this relates to like success and just getting through, even be it an exercise or an interview or whatever it might be. Of course, I'm in my seat. I got my heating pad, but there's a lot of things I was missing last week. One of them was my notebook. I will take notes quietly. I will have an idea that I might want to ask or something like that. That's very important for me in these. I also have proper lighting. I have my second screen here. And I also have a little bit of prep. Now, I didn't prep and go figure out, how we should write a TDD, but I took a second to think about how I would have actually addressed this problem if I hadn't been thrown into the hot seat.
Isn't it hot a hot seat as well? So how is it cold today?
Well,
what's the temperature today?
The temperature's much better. It's still cold outside.
Today's lukewarm.
Hey, I just shared a Google Doc with you, and I just want to, if you don't mind, just opening up that really quick to the audience. That's the actual 99 bottles of beer lyrics, and I just added a couple comments on there of how I would approach that, because I just came in so.
I'm doing it. I got it.
And you should be able to see comments on it as well. And there's only a few. Most of the stuff we've gone over. But I just wanted to highlight how I would actually approach this if I was given this as an exercise. If I was in a coding interview, like I haven't done any of this stuff in 5 years, people. So what I did was just go to the top real quick, and I'll just go through the comments really fast.
Yeah,
sure. It'll make a ton of sense for everyone.
Let me make the font a little bit bigger, because I think that's usually a...
Yeah.
I think this is the largest we can go.
The first thing we notice is that there's a template that we can use. Almost all of the text is repetitive, so identify the template. That first one, short of the numbers in there and the plurality. That's our template, right? We also are seeing our x and x minus 1, which is great. Something that we missed last week, I think, is we want to store the original x. We want to store that 99. We want to have this program be able to run starting at 98 or 101. That's important because at the bottom, the very last line says... way down. Last half of the last sentence. We need to carry that through. Okay. And then, of course, on the bottom here, I identified, how we're on the last verse, x equals 1. We also have our singular use, which we had talked about. And then at top, I just also made some comments that I would clarify with whoever was conducting, a test of this nature. How do we care about line breaks, things like that, which we talked a little bit about, but even possibly embedding line breaks in the array, like a /n or something like that.
I wouldn't even use an array like that. That's one of the things where we get into the details, into the weeds of composability. The instruction in the actual requirements to use an array is actually very misleading.
Yeah.
Because because this is a stringly typed problem.
Yes.
The user will be delighted only when the lyrics are very neatly formatted and there is a new line between the verses. That would be like my only quality control. It should look like that. Like it shouldn't make me write a reducer that says every second array element add an extra new line. Right? So it shouldn't have that like gimmickry going on. It should naturally flow into that kind of format. And that's also part of the behavior, right? So we're also going to talk about structure sensitivity, which this is, and behavior. Why is this behavior important? Well, because lyrically speaking, these are verses, and the verses generally in poems and similar constructs have a new line. So that's sort of where this is going, right? So the language is important.
I would ask that question, and we're on the same page, Dennis. I think it's about context and expectations.
This is a song. The domain, song. poem, verses, lyrics, right? So we're not this is not Fibonacci. We're not doing coding for coding's sake. We are helping sort of some kind of song business domain problem.
So what we do is we set boundaries and expectations on that, like
correct.
Because there is a little bit of ambiguity in the exercise, and I think the ambiguity is part of the exercise. And I think that in an exercise of that nature, you want to at least address it or note it, because if there's ambiguity in a question or a problem, it's hard to answer correctly.
So let's talk about ambiguity. Can I drop the doc? Is there anything else you want to...
I just wanted to kind of show everybody how I would normally sort of approach that problem.
I redid the exercise solo just to see where I would go naturally if I wasn't in the hot seat. And I came up with something very similar. There's some differences that I can see that I think would be great to sort of go through in the end after even Jeff comes on. Because Jeff also has a code example, but he wrote it in Java. So I can't run it. I don't have GDK on this machine. I forgot to set it up, but I have the code and I have the Git history of how Jeff coded, so we can see his red green.
But save the link. If you are not done with the test today, you need to sing the song in the end of the show.
No, it's all
I'll have
done.
to get a quick subscription to 11 Labs. Okay.
Okay, awesome. Let me put the code on the screen. So I also reorganized the code slightly. Wait, no, I actually stop sharing and then start sharing this baby. Where are we? So this is Mark. So we left off here, right? So we had, so we started writing and we just basically got one verse going and we said we extracted the template, right? So our what was at the very top of your Google Doc was actually what we ended up. Oh, I'm sorry, font size. Production 22. 22 is Dennis streaming font size, and we don't.
It was okay before as well.
We don't need this. There we go. Okay. So the template, what was at the top of your Google Doc, is actually the first thing we wrote. We just created the many of following zombies, and this is where Jeff sort of disagreed with us. And when I did the exercise solo, is what I found myself actually getting distracted by as well. Is what I did first is I did the static version first. Is I did the last verse first, and it was actually our first item on the test plan. But you did mention that you wanted the plurality problem of the many case to be handled first, just to give you some confidence. And I would say, would you agree that's because we're in TypeScript and that you're not very natural in this environment, and you should have wanted a little bit of a snack before we can...
Partially.
Partially.
Anytime I tackle a big task, I do look for low-hanging fruit, easy wins, and quick success. And that comes from doing development from so long. To be able to show results.
To build confidence,
Yeah, and it does build confidence. It makes me comfortable. Okay, I got something that works good. I want to keep going. If you enter into a problem and the first three things you do just beat you on the head, it changes how you approach the problem. So understanding what your mindset is and how to control that a little bit better is really important. Now, that may not be perfect practice from, some textbook, maybe one of the ones behind me, but in the long run, that's what keeps you going for 10, 20 years in this craft.
Yeah. So, where should we go next?
I had a couple things I wanted to add. We do want to store the 99. I'm assuming that number could change.
I wouldn't make that assumption.
Okay.
What would make... Right, because I don't think... if I had requirements in the sense of I might want to reuse... Right? Yeah, I think I would sooner change the language of the song to 99 Luftballons, because there's an equivalent in German, which is 99, but it's about balloons, not about beers.
Yes.
And then there's the Jägermeister song, which is 10 to 0.
10 kleine Jägermeister.
10 kleine Jägermeister, yeah. So there are many songs like this. So I think it's usually 99 or 10 or 12.
Yeah.
But I think the noun would change, or the language would change much sooner than the number.
Okay.
But I like where you're going with this.
I still think we should carry, as I pointed out, I think we need to carry
Yeah.
that 99 down to the bottom. So we do need to
True. Okay.
have that
Is
available.
that a refactoring step or is that like a hard requirement?
I would say it's a hard requirement since 99 is in the last line.
If I put the lyrics back, like back to back,
Right.
then the last line and the first line touch. So they would have locality.
Okay.
So carrying it wouldn't be necessary. Carrying it is only necessary from the context of I'm looking at it from 99 to 0, and then I need to not forget 99. But if you're looking at it from like an infinite verse, the 99 and the 0 actually touch. The next line of 0 is 99, and it naturally follows just by concatenating.
Again, that's an assumption land for me.
Mm-hmm.
That is in assumption. All I'm saying is that I see 99 on the first line, and I see
And they're
99 on the
separate, and they're
last
very
line.
far away, and you want to make them closer together.
Well, it's not even making them close together. You could get into a looping situation, and we know there's
Okay.
variants on how you might loop, where you could be decrementing something and essentially
Very good. Very good.
vanish
You don't want
your
to.
original number.
Yeah, you don't want to go negative or above. So
Yeah.
you sort of want to constrain the boundaries.
Yeah, and
How would you write a test for that?
The one other thing that did come to mind here, if I'm not jumping ahead here, is I would probably do some force checks on int if we don't have it in there already. No
Okay.
floats, no memory locations, no characters.
That I think we can trust TypeScript for, because I'm not doing any float operations. I'm only doing integer operations with the number type. The number type is a wide type, so it can be a float, it can be a big int, it can be a long.
Yeah.
But only if I'm mixing with decimal operations, which I'm not.
Yeah.
So I think we can trust TypeScript on that part.
And
But I
have
would do it in something like Python.
I'm a little bit more of a hardcore tester if it really gets down to it. I don't test to prove it works. I test to prove I can't break it. And not everybody has that philosophy. So
it's more of a QA mentality.
It is more of a QA mentality.
Yeah.
So I'm into fuzzing and things like that. So that starts to go into my brain.
So
it can be
on
distracting.
On the test Desiderata, you want it to be more production-like, but that will also make them a little bit slower and a little bit less composable, right? So we just need to be aware of that trade-off.
Yeah. And talking through all of this is really important because, if we address one of these in a conversation and it becomes a problem, we're much more ready for it. You don't get into a blame environment. You don't have faults necessarily.
Correct. At least you addressed it. Yes. After the fact, it will be obvious whether it was necessary to be addressed once we're done with the exercise.
Yeah. Right, let's do it.
What should the next test be? We're passing right now. Wait, what was it, Adrian? You
npm run dev.
Run dev?
Test watch. Should be autocomplete already. Test.
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we got it. Yeah, but it is recompiling the entire Tailwind application. That's why they're so slow. I was wondering.
We need to clean that up a little bit.
Yeah, we need to clean this up without the project. So that's my bad on the pipeline. But they are running. Oh, not tests found. Why? I'm in the wrong.
Yeah,
The Java.
99 bottles, Jeff.
Yeah, 99 bottles. Smart. Okay. No test found. Oh, I broke something. Very sorry.
I did
What did I
see
do?
something in there.
Are you sure last time you haven't had this 99 bottles mark?
Yeah, because I changed them. I changed them around a little bit. Maybe I just need to. Go
Is it possible that it doesn't recognize the tests because it is now too deep in the directories?
It is possible. Yeah, that is possible.
Quickly move it up just one. I don't know where it was before. I don't think so.
It's okay. I just filtered
no
them
worries.
out. I just ran everything. Yeah, it's okay. I'll just
Good,
run slower.
good.
It's all good. Okay, so the test pass. Where do we want to go from here?
Okay, let me see. The first one we did here, we're testing the plurality. It looks like we have that tested. Would I be paranoid to want to test the plurality on a
Well, if I put one in here, it's not correct, right?
Exactly.
Because I said it's for more than one bottle, so I didn't.
Yeah, okay.
I didn't create a test for one bottle.
So I think It's superfluous almost, but I would still test for a singularity. I would
Okay.
make sure that wasn't there. It's a little thick, but it's not bad either.
Okay. So what's our interface? So I have a verse here. I called it the verse function. But do you want to test against some like internally exposed like verse function, or are we testing the entire array? Are we testing the entire string, the lyrics? What do you want the composable format to be?
This is something that I want to ask you, and it might be out of scope in this. In the context of testing this, you can, and we're getting into assumptions here, you can assume that we start with 99 and we're decrementing. Do we want to test every single line that 98 is an integer or anything like that?
What would you do? Like, if you watched the episode from the beginning on the test Desiderata components, right? So, what kind of test would that be? Would it be a fast test?
It would be reasonably fast.
Okay, but
I say
do you want
reasonably
me
because
to?
it's still a test, and it's still hitting every line, and it's still laborious, and it's still a little unnecessary. But I think of.
But you wouldn't write the tests. You would write a loop for the tests.
Yes.
You wouldn't write 99.
Oh God, no.
Because that would be an end-to-end test. And I myself, just for completion's sake, and Jeff as well, have put the entire lyrics into the test and said, okay, once I'm done, does it match this?
Yeah.
But I would never keep such a test.
Yeah.
Keeping such a test is always silly, because if I'm going to change behavior, make it Luftballons, not bottles, then now I have a lot of search and replace to do.
Yes.
Right. So the composable properties of the lyrics should be enough for me to validate that the test is correct. If I have the full end-to-end test and the composable tests, and if I need both, then there's something wrong with the composability.
In that case, I would only have a singularity test on the one line. If bottles one, or if one is the number, bottles should be single, or bottles should be bottle.
Can I just? Do you mind if I just?
No, go for it. You're
what you
way
said
faster
word
than me.
for word. It formats the bottle verse, and I see something superfluous. I can say it formats the verse in a special way for one bottle.
Yes.
Okay. Now, how do I express that? Possibly non-bottles equals 1.
Yep.
And then I expect verse 1 of non-bottles. And I see some repetition here with the previous line.
Yes.
To be, what is the one verse? Should I do the obvious thing, or should we check somewhere?
Well, the singularity hits, and
we have it here.
Yeah.
So we have it in the testing plan.
Yeah. We want to make sure that there's bottle, singular, not bottles, next to a 1. That would be, I think, about as succinct as you could get given this circumstance. Now, composability and changing it to balloons or something, obviously, you've changed the program enough to
not in scope for today's show. Not in scope for today's show. That's just an example to challenge your thinking about composability.
It's a valid one.
So
but this is now a very strict version. So especially when it comes to strings, so let's say translation strings, it would make sense to only test about that there is no bottle but bottles inside, but not exactly if the comma is correct, because this can cause problems, because the test should not test translations.
Exactly. And
because they are variables.
Composability, right? So remember composability. Yeah. I don't want to test all the dimensions, because what am I testing here? I'm testing that the number is there. I'm testing that the noun is there. I'm testing whether the comma is correct. And also, on the later verses, when there's no more bottles, I also have to test for the capitalization of the N and whether the period is at the end, right? So I might not want to test all of these little details. And I also added the period, and we didn't have a period earlier, and we also didn't have it in the, right? So what would you like to do? How exact do you want to write the tests?
Okay, on this one here.
Yeah, for one bottle.
If we have a verse, the number of bottles where it's 1, I would expect to see 1 bottle.
1 bottle. So it should contain.
Contain 1 bottle, because up here on the wall, comma, all that other stuff.
Now there's an
unrelated.
issue. There's an issue here, and this is always a problem with stringly typed properties. See, the problem is if I have one bottles, then the phrase one bottles actually contains one bottle.
With a
You
space.
would need to have a space after that, right? Or a regular expression if you want to make it complex.
I'm
That's
trying not
exactly-
to bring regular expressions in here.
I would,
just being honest.
and that's where I would start sort of disagreeing as your pairing partner, because the regular expression, this is a stringly typed problem. Whenever you have a stringly typed problem, your regular expressions are your best friend.
Yeah.
Because I should be able to express, I want to see one bottle, and then I expect a word boundary.
Yes.
So \b in regex, right? So I expect there to be another word, a space, a period, a comma, but I don't want to really make it specific about my test. I just want to see one bottle. What I can also do is I can say, I'm not going to use that technology, and I'm going to do the silly thing.
No.
And I will express that explicitly and say, I want it to contain one bottle and not one bottles. That's an alternative.
Yeah.
To not use regex.
That one has problems because you're testing absence of. And when you test absence of, that means that
no. So I'm So it appears as if I'm testing an absence on purpose, but it's not actually. It is actually just a replacement for my inability to write a regex of one bottle \b.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what's happening here. And here I would add a comment. So I would say this is a lower quality test than if I were using regexes.
Yeah.
But it might be that I'm just missing something very important in the composability. But I would say writing this test is much better than repeating the entire line, because we really care about the composability. But it also means that we need to write the previous line differently as well.
And the question is, how would we do this? So, for example, if you would have the German word, which is Flasche, or Flaschen is plural, so an N in the end, not an S in the end, and the noun is different as well. And we want to only test the word. The question is, should we go with an additional variable? Or how would you actually implement this? That would be interesting for me to know.
I think it will have several tests. It will have more tests, right? Because our behavior will be more complex. Right? So
is it? What is it if your product team is coming now with 60 new languages?
Well, the question is, am I implementing English, German instead of English? Or do I want my function to handle both English and German, right? So do I want both behaviors interchangeably as a compositional metric, or do I just want to shift from one to the other, right? So that would be sort of where I would go with this, and I would err on the side of
internationalization would tell you a lot more on if we knew what that approach was, what our toolkit was.
Yeah.
That would define.
I might have a templating engine library that then follows common tools like I18N, string replacements and pattern replacements. Where there would also be rules of.
It becomes complicated in languages where you don't have pluralism.
Agreed. Yes. Yeah. Or special rules. Slovenia has the dual number. So we have 1, 2 things and more than 2 things, right? And our 3 things is sometimes different than the 4 things.
Slavic versus Romance languages. Huge difference.
Yeah.
Huge difference.
Also, you might have differences in the gender of the noun, which you do have in German, but not in English. So the nouns do have sex, they do have gender, but they're not being used. There's no syntax difference because of the gender.
I have a degree in linguistics if you ever want to go down that path.
Awesome. Okay, test is failing. How should I fix the test? I'm a bit time sensitive right now because we do.
Which the new test failed? Let's see here.
Yeah, so I haven't implemented it, right? So this is just statically returning the plural verse for verse 1. What would you do here?
We should be returning number bottles of beer on the wall, number bottles of beer. So bottles -1 is not happening.
No, so the test is failing. We're not handling
shouldn't you have the input of the entire text somewhere and then pick the line by splitting the lines and say first line is actually my first line?
That is an end-to-end test. It wouldn't satisfy my composability rules. I've actually written that already in the.
But the problem, but I have a problem actually here. It is like you're testing inside the test, you're not really testing the actual component. There's no component here. This function you have right now is just it's just verse 1, and you want to have.
We haven't moved it out yet. That's a refactoring step. We haven't done that yet.
Yeah. So it feels a little bit like the function was created for the test, and that should not be the case.
Yeah,
it should be the case. This function satisfied this test.
It satisfied plurality, but not singularity.
Sorry, it satisfied this one for plurality. Yeah. So
but it is. I still think that the task is to have a function which creates an array, and we should test this. And at the moment, we don't have that.
We don't have the interface.
Right.
But we started.
Is what I mean.
But Mark asked start from this direction. So we're testing from the inside implementation out. And what you're explaining, Adrian, is actually structure sensitivity. We're testing the wrong structure, so we're sensitive to how we've decided to implement. We can hide that later, but it's really important that we do so. But it's not wrong to follow this path. We need to end up with a function that says song that takes no parameters. We don't have that right now.
Yeah. But we would have a verse 2.
Is this? Yeah, we have a second verse as well. This is the first verse. This is verse 1, which is the first line in the array. And right now we asked it to do one bottle. So should I do the if statement? Should I do the obvious thing? Or should I split the functions? What would you like me to do, Mark?
For brevity, I'd do an if.
If, okay. If bottles equals
bottle,
1.
Yeah, bottle equals 1.
Okay. In short circuit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just for brevity.
Should I do, one bottle. One bottle. Okay.
Yeah,
Now the song has a period at the end. Should I fix that now, and should I address that in the refactoring step?
I believe everything has a period at the end.
Okay.
If I remember,
should we make that explicit as a test?
Boy, that's a judgment call because we're talking about language here.
And that's detail. We might be nitpicking.
I think we're nitpicking because part of the exercise discussed returning it in an array type format. In more of a computer science. So you could include that in there. You could add that at the end. Of course, that's another layer that that has its own very big problems. So honestly, I would try to just stick as close to the original lyrics as possible that we're trying to reproduce, and consider any pattern-based punctuation as static, as reliable.
Okay, that's so fair. I would say, let's change this one to contain as well. Let's refactor it.
Okay.
And because the period is a suffix, and then if I add the period here, that is a detail that is untested right now. It remains to be tested because our test didn't guide us on this. But at least I can add it now and solve the problem without making our test fail.
Yeah.
Right. So I made our test a little bit more structure insensitive to what they actually test, which is the plurality of the bottle. They are not testing the period at the end of the string. I don't want them to fail because of that.
I feel like the point that we just went through there, Dennis, is one of the larger meta points in these types of exercises.
Yeah.
That's the bigger point. We understand how loops...
Composability. Yeah. This test on line 24 should only fail for plurality reasons. It should not fail because of the period at the end.
Be explicit.
Be explicit, exactly. Because when it fails, I should know exactly what stopped working. So if I add something weird, or if I translate it to Luftballons, if the numbers are correct, at least some of the tests should still pass. Yeah. I shouldn't have this blanket everything fails because I changed one character in my template.
No, I agree completely.
Okay, what's next?
Okay, so we got plurality. I think the big thing we really want to do now is start looping and start considering what that loop is and what the greater template is.
So the interface. So this song, we need an array or strings, or we don't have lyrics, we just have verses here.
Yeah.
So what are we looping? How would you express the test?
I'm trying to I'm just reviewing.
We have a test plan. Which one of these is it?
Let me see here. That would be 4, I would believe. Song goes on by decrementing number of bottles in each verse.
Okay, where do we start?
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, because I do have a case here that says the song has 99 verses plus the final one. We can check that, and then that would force us to loop.
Yeah. The only problem I have with number 2 is that we do need to define what the verse is, and we've already defined the verse variably.
Yeah, we said the verse has 2 sentences, has 2 lines,
Yeah.
and we have verse 1 is the first line in a verse, and we don't have verse 2.
So I take that back. Let's get verse 2 in there because there's many of the similar problems that we have to deal with. Do you agree?
Agree. I'm happy to, as long as we do it fast, because we are running out of time, and I want to give Jeff a chance to. I don't want to sing the entire song at the end. I mean, I have a solution, but it's not.
So don't brag, code, right?
Yeah, let's go. What's the second verse?
Take one down, pass it around. Take one down. I'm gonna open up my link here so I can look at all.
Yeah, so it's take one down, pass it around. No more bottles of beer on the wall. That's the last one. Take one down, pass it around. X-1 bottles of beer on the wall, and it might be 1 or bottles or no more. Right. So what is the natural verse of that case?
The natural verse or the majority verse is take one down, pass it around. X-1 bottles of beer on the wall. Period.
Okay. So the second verse decrements.
X.
It loses a bottle. Let's be a little bit more English here. It loses a bottle on the second line of each verse.
Yes.
Following the format. I'm implying what the format is because I have a testing plan, but we have failed to make it very explicit.
Yeah.
So how would I write a test for that?
Let me see here.
You have a Google Doc on that?
Yeah, I'm just looking at my Google Doc on it because obviously helps me think. We're assuming that we're using a templating system, so it's going to be the same basic language. We're not doing internationalization. So we are again getting into plurality.
What do I expect to see? What do I expect to see?
We expect to see take one down, pass it around, X-1 bottles. So the real big one that you want to test for is X-1 bottles.
Okay, so let's say I'm testing number of bottles is 50.
Yes.
Take one down, pass it around, 49 bottles with an S of beer on the wall. That's
Correct.
what I'm expecting to see. Or rather, I'm expecting not to see 50 again repeated.
Not expecting to see 50. Expecting to see one less unless it's 1. So there's a number of tests related to this.
So it's verse 2, non-bottles to contain the following our previous example. Take one down, pass it around, 49 bottles of beer on the wall. Yes?
Yes.
And I double quoted this one unintentionally. Okay. I'm right clicking, refactor.
We don't have verse 2 written, of course.
Yeah, we have an editor for that, and it should return this templated as take one down, pass it around, non-bottles -1, I'm assuming, right?
Yes.
And that's this case covered.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's going to break, but we'll deal with that.
It's going to break on an edge case we haven't test covered yet. Okay.
Yeah.
So should I specify that this is a plural case?
I think so.
Or is this the 2 case? Because the 1 case, it breaks several times.
It is a plural case because you have it written explicitly.
This is a bottle on.
This is a plural case. We have 3 things that we need to test for on the second line. Okay, so we
following
need
the
to test
format for plural cases. Yeah. So there we go, plural case. Okay.
And I would repeat that for singular and none.
Okay. So a singular case is when I have
1 bottle.
1 bottle or 2 bottles. 2.
Yeah, sorry, 2. I had a test.
So yeah, so when I have 2 bottles, it says take one down, pass it around. One bottle of beer on the wall. Again, but we have this templating thing going on now, right? So if
you can do
beer
on one bottle.
Yeah.
It should contain 1 bottle.
Yeah.
But again, I have this word boundary thing going on.
You can delete the first part before the comma, actually.
Okay, I like that. So we make it a little bit simpler. Okay.
I would often write that test long and then try to just shorten it down. You know what I mean? There's a lot of stuff that we could obviously chop off of that sentence, which we did.
But again, there might be some pure TDD practitioners would say, hey, if you're changing the test to that degree and it's not a refactoring step, you actually sort of, well, once you have it implemented, you're making it a little bit implementation sensitive to sort of make you happy. That might be considered cheating. But we are sort of going towards the end goal and refactoring. Like some people just want to get through all the tests and then refactor. I personally refactored on each step to create abstractions as I needed them.
Yeah.
But this is now still failing. Why is it failing? Well, because verse 2 doesn't have a one case. May I follow our pattern from the previous case and
it's pretty much the same pattern. I think there might be a minor edit in there.
So if num bottles equals 2, then I have the I'm just gonna change. I'm gonna adapt the wording here because I extracted. This is bottles, then bottles -1. Actually, I don't care about this one. It's actually just 1. I don't care. And it's 2, it's 1.
Yep. And then the other one should be fine. I think we passed.
We passed, yes.
Yeah, the comment was just over the output.
Yeah. We still don't have verses, new lines, arrays. Do you want to loop now?
We have to handle the none. We have to handle the none.
Okay.
Which is really the same thing, just testing for num bottles 1.
Final case.
Then no bottles.
No bottles of beer on the wall.
Yeah.
So it's just contain no bottles.
Yeah.
Okay. And
cool.
It's failing right now. And I will do when it's not when it's 2, when it's 1, then one case will decrement to 0 and it will say no more bottles. So
and
I'm
I think
checking if it fails.
For brevity, a conditional right there for equal to 1.
Yeah, agreed. So if it's 1, it's capital no bottle of beer. No bottles of beer or no bottles? No.
Take one down, pass it around, 1 bottle of beer on the wall. Take one
no
down,
more
pass
bottles.
it around, no more.
No more. Okay. So you don't. If we had over templated it, we would have a problem here. Yes. But because we are using a more general structure, we actually dodge the bullet. No more bottles of beer on the wall. No more bottles of beer. Again, templating this is hard because one of them is uppercase, one of them is lowercase.
Yeah.
Right. So it now depends on whether you want to make that general or not. Now is, let's say, a prime time to refactor this, but we still don't have an array.
Yeah.
Tests fail. Why? No more bottles of beer. Because I said it should contain no bottles and it should contain no more bottles.
I missed that.
And it should contain no more bottles uppercase. So it should contain both.
Yep.
We really need to work on the quality fast with the tests. 8 seconds for such a small test is awesome.
Yeah, no, it's recompiling. It's transpiling the entire Tailwind application, so it's not. We don't have it set it up for a simple kata. We hijacked our project. What's next?
We might as well just go ahead.
We still don't have the full array.
Yeah, I would say the last 2 lines are the ones that we would address. No more bottles of beer on the wall. No more bottles of beer. So
what is that case?
Num bottle 0.
Okay. Jeff mentions the verse 2 code is wrong and the test did not detect it. Jeff, can you give us some more detail? Or if you could join us on stage. Adrian, could you send Jeff a quick link?
I thought it was already done. Okay.
No, Jeff, I haven't. I had sent the link to Mark, but I forgot to send Jeff a link.
I will.
Maybe Jeff can join us and we can have a live conversation because Jeff has code with us as well. Mark, what else?
The final line. No more bottles of beer on the wall.
Okay. How do I call that test? Do we have it in the test plan?
Yeah, I believe that's one of the last ones.
Mm-hmm. The last verse of the song is always this. Okay. So the last verse is always the same and restarts at 99, I'd say.
Yep.
Right? So I would expect verse 1 of 0 to contain no more bottles of beer on the wall, no more bottles of beer. and I would expect verse 2 of 0 to contain
Go to the store.
go to the store and buy some more, 99 bottles of beer on the wall. And now if we had parameterized 99, which you suggested but we haven't done yet, then now we would sort of have that parameter in here.
Exactly.
But I think it would make our test a little bit more complicated because we'd have to pass it around and we'd have to know, you know,
Failed.
we would have to give that, we haven't implemented it yet. We need to implement it.
Yeah.
So they should have implemented it with an obvious if in both cases. You see how our cases are a bit split? Like we seem to have cohesive code across both functions.
Yes. No,
they're
there's
offset
repetition.
by one. There's repetition. Okay.
Yeah. But consolidation also risks unnecessary complexity. In certain circumstances, and this is a more of a senior decision. Would you like to have more smaller to read tests, or would you like to have less but more cryptic tests?
Yeah, I would definitely avoid over abstracting, but I do see that I end up having to change multiple places at the same time, which is perhaps somewhat suboptimal.
I would variabilize some of that stuff, but we're not going to do that now.
We can do it, but I would like us to make it pass first, and then we can variabilize some of that.
Exactly.
So I can say, so the first one was this. I'm just going to copy paste it. And again, I have repetition from my test to my code as well. That's also a concern. That kind of dry.
No, that's a flag.
I don't mind if the tests are wet. If there's at least written at least twice. If it's a different format. If it's written differently for a different reason, right? So if there's a compositional reason why it is written that way, right? And we we didn't have we have the periods here now, which we didn't have earlier.
Yeah.
That's now the weeds are starting to show. But our production code, which is this, is actually making sense. If I read the code, I'm sort of, so that's the last verse. It's not written in the order that I expect it to, right? It's written in the opposite order than I would expect the song to go. But
I always
do it
backwards.
Yeah, so it is. We ended up going backwards because we didn't follow zombies. If we had followed zombies, we would have.
I never heard zombies before today.
Yeah, so Jeff and I did.
Down for me to do a little more sniffing around.
Jeff and I did our solo takes with zombies, and with zombies, you end up with code where 99 is on top, and then you go down to 0.
Yeah,
and
because
now you have mentioned Jeff, and I'll bring Jeff now on the stage. And here he is.
Hi there, Jeff.
Hey, everybody, give a nice, gracious applause to Jeff. Jeff, hello.
Hello, Jeff.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Great.
Very well. Thank you. Jeff, you mentioned we missed a case. What was the case?
Well, I take a close look at verse 2 and and I kind of wonder about it. Well, consider that that line at the top of verse 2 for bottles equals 2. 1 bottle of beer on the wall, 1 bottle of beer. Take one down, pass it around, no bottles of beer. Wait a minute. The take one down part is the second verse.
That's the second line in the verse, yes. Verse 2 means that's the second line in the verse. So the 2 verse will say 2 bottles of beer, 2 bottles of beer, blah, 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 1 bottle of beer on the wall. That's so the 2 is 2 and 1. The verse... Sorry.
It's more like verse component 1 and verse component 2.
So it's verse. It's the second line. Yeah, so it's the verse second line and the. Let me refactor. So Jeff made a really good comment. It's confusing. It's not clear. So let's refactor. Our test passed. Let's refactor. Shift F6. Verse second line. I'm not going to even use a number. And this is the verse first line. And I've already explained and I've already explained what a verse is in my test.
Yes.
In my test plan. We have deviated from the test plan somewhat, which is interesting. And we actually didn't follow the order of the test plan, which is also interesting.
God, no, I would never follow my own order.
Any other comments?
I'm getting to Jeff. I see it.
Jeff, was that a misunderstanding, or do you still think we have an issue in the test, in the code?
Well, as I understand it, the first line of each verse says there are this many bottles of beer on the wall.
This many bottles of beer repeated? Yeah.
The second line always says you take one down and pass it around, or it says you go to the store. Wait a minute, that's not what this function is doing.
Exactly. It is not. The second line is about the verbal thing, so it's about the doing, and the first line is about it's basically two different things. So in line 8, we shouldn't have that in that function.
Yeah, that's actually an incorrectly written test. This is not correct.
Yeah, the first two lines are wrong.
Yeah, we made a mistake.
Good catch.
Because our test is actually composing correctly, but our implementation is not correct because we haven't composed the correct part. Our tests are not expressing behavior, right? So the verse, each sentence in the first line of the verse has an echo. We have not described what that means, right? So it repeats.
Yes.
Right. So because our tests are written in a very sensitive implementation sensitive way, it's very structure sensitive. We're now seeing how it's starting to burst at the seams because we haven't captured the behavior. The behavior says what? The first verse has a rhyme. It repeats. The second verse has an action, and then it says how many bottles we have left. And then the next verse after the next line in the next verse repeats this rhyme and has its own rhyme in the same sentence, and then it keeps looping around like that. And then the last few verses, the last few lines have different actions because we're running out of bottles. That would be the actual behavior, but we haven't done that, right? So because our test's plan was too technical, we are now seeing issues. We have to go around our too technical language. So what's missing? What can I add here to make it a little bit more clear? Should I split up the lines and make it more clear?
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, Mark?
I just want to say that's a really good point that Jeff kind of extracted out of here. That echo is not something I really noticed, but it's completely accurate. And
this
that
is the echo. X bottles of beer on the wall, X bottles of beer. So there's an echo of the previous part, right? So our sentence is actually, each verse has 4 components, not 2, right? So it's not line independent, right? So there's top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right, if I call it that.
Split
right?
by the commas.
Split by the commas, exactly.
And the second part of the first verse is the
matches
first part
the
of
first
the second
one.
verse.
Yes. And it's capitalized.
That echo, I actually didn't see or notice that pattern at first. So absolute props to Jeff.
So we mentioned the bottles correctly, but we didn't echo correctly, which means that we have a test, which gives us a false positive.
Yep.
That's not good.
Yep.
And we actually copy-pasted this from the test, which is why we didn't catch it. So very keen eye, Jeff. Well done. Mark, do you want to continue, or do you want to give Mark a chance to highlight us his code? Because I do have his code in the other folder. What do you want to do here? We only have 15 minutes left. So
I want to use the time effectively, and I want to give it to Jeff more than anything else.
Okay.
So I'm happy to participate or contribute on that, but I know Jeff put some time, and I think he should have the spotlight.
Okay. So Jeff, I'm switching over to your tests. And I have
been a while for Java.
Yeah. So what I have
Java.
So I have history here on your folder. So I have, can you see the Git history? Yes. So you sent me 6 blurbs. So I have each of your blurbs here. So your first test was this.
Yes.
Your first test follows zombies. Can you walk us through your mental process?
In our discussion, I said, if the problem is to do the 99 bottles of beer on the wall song, and that's it, then a one-line program that just returns that array as a constant is the simplest, easiest way to go. If you really want algorithms, you kind of need to say, well, I want to be able to sing these 6 lines of beer song. It has only 7 verses in it. So that boils down, what is the simplest possible case of that? Well, that's the 0 bottles of beer on the wall. Please sing me a song, 0 bottles of beer on the wall. And you got 1 verse. It's got 2 lines.
No more bottles of beer on the wall, no more bottles of beer. Go to the store and buy some more 99 bottles of beer on the wall. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a bit contrived, right? Because
Yes.
our requirements don't actually ask us to have a 0 bottle song.
Yes.
But it does handle the 0 case. But a lyrical expert, a songwriter would perhaps not use this language. So it hits the spot for composability, but perhaps not readability. I'm reconnecting it back with the test Desiderata qualities. But I like where we headed with the zombies.
Yes, I was going to say
red.
zombies because this is the 0 case.
This is the red of the 0 case. It's red because we return an empty array of a array of strings in Java, which has been initialized to 0 elements, and the 0th element does not have a string value. It's empty.
So to make it pass, I simply hard code that one verse, the 2 lines, like
this
that.
one. Yes. So it's on the. I will just. But now I lost Git. So this is the Git diff, and then Jeff added this line to make the test pass. Yep. And now it's green.
Right.
I didn't run it. I don't have GDK on. I didn't run it, but I trust that it's green now.
Yes. Now at green we could refactor, and I did not refactor. If I got
what would you have refactored?
Well, later I was thinking, I see number bottles 3 times here. Yeah, a number and bottles 3 times here.
No more bottles. 99 bottles. So no more and bottles. No more and bottles. This one's lowercase, by the way. This one's uppercase. This one's 99, but the bottles are the same. And it just so happens to be that the 0 case follows the plural rule, which it wouldn't have to, but it does in this case.
Yeah.
Yes. So the thing is, all 3 are different, which kind of discourages me from extracting it because they're not really the same.
There's no commonality. There's that itch, but it wouldn't actually make the problem simpler.
I will do it in the next step, which is the 1 step. Please sing me the song 1 bottle of beer, which is 2 verses, 5 lines there, as you see.
So it's lyrics for bottles of beer, 1. Yes. It'll contain all lines for the entire song of the lyrics.
Yes.
So there is repetition.
Yes.
Okay.
And so I'm okay with tests having repetition.
Agreed. So you said you made a trade-off. You made the tests give you more confidence and be more clear at the trade-off of being less composable. If I translated this to German, you would have a lot of manual labor changing all of the bottles to Luftballons or to
That's true.
Flaschen. Okay. Is the implementation obvious? Is there anything weird or unexpected?
Well, this gets you a red. This test fails. And so what's the simplest way of making it work? So I add an if statement.
And I noticed that you added
go ahead.
You added an assertion helper.
Yes. Well, in Java, you cannot easily compare arrays directly to each other. It's a Java limitation.
Yeah. And for me personally, it's also why I dislike Java, because it is extremely verbose on it's very wordy. It's on the arrays, stream, expected lines, collectors joining system line separator, right? So it's a very wordy way of saying array split, new line, join, comma, or whichever direction we're going with that.
Yeah, Java is verbose in that way. It's just something you have to deal with in Java.
We accept that limitation in favor of having another example to look at. So this is now red.
Yes.
This fails because we added the 1. This is
our
code. The code is static. Yeah. It doesn't handle the input. Obviously red. Okay.
Right.
Second green. Second green now has 2 test cases. Not composable. They're sort of end-to-end.
Right.
And now you've added the most obvious solution to the problem.
Yes.
Which is you are aware that the 0 song is contained in the 1 song, so you just appended the 1 case to the 0 case. So you went to zombies, and you saw that the 1 case has a natural inclusion. The 0 case is naturally included in the 1 case.
Yes. And Java does not have array concatenation.
So you wrote one.
I'm sorry.
So here I'm bringing in an array list and then adding lines to the array list. I can't just do an array directly. Another Java limitation.
Now, if you had not chosen, and this is also something I wanna mention, is that the initial requirements to create a song with arrays might have been misleading. See, if you had gone directly with strings, you wouldn't have run into this. You could have solved this problem with a string buffer, with a string builder, and you wouldn't have to forgo the let's say the overstructuredness of the song, because let's face it, this is what ticked me off as well at the beginning, is that the instructions, the README, was inconsistent in whether the pretty human version of the song has a new line between the verses, but the example array output didn't. So should I add it or not, right? So you had to cheat no matter what. But I have chosen to cheat by just not making it arrayed, and I make it stringly typed, and I have created arrays from the strings after the fact. I've created a reducer to sort of follow that output. But we can look at that example in the end. But I like the simplicity of your approach.
And Java makes new lines complicated because there's that whole system line separator, which has like 3 different implementations that I know of.
Yeah, and
Java makes new lines for
the strings. The strings are basically binary strings. They're not what you would consider ASCII strings or sort of human enriched strings, like rope strings that Node.js has in JavaScript.
Well, worse, there are 3 different conventions for how you do a new line. Linux does it completely different than Windows.
Yeah. We will satisfy for.
So,
I hinted at that a little bit, Jeff. I hope you picked up on that.
So this passes the tests.
And I see you refactored.
And then I did some refactoring, because then having 6 places where it says number of bottles of beer, that started to bug me.
Let's see how you solve that. Now, I'm seeing a lot more complexity, a lot more lines change in this refactoring step. This is quite a big refactoring step.
Yes.
I'm actually gonna...
now, I did the refactorings 1 step at a time, but I only gave you copies.
Of course, you always...
afterwards.
Yeah. I'm aware of that. I was able to extract that. So what you did is that once the tests are...
The tests did
are
not
still
change.
testing. The tests are still testing the entire thing, and you have created a new class to encapsulate what's going on. And the NB bottles of beer on the wall test has a get lyrics function, and the get lyrics has where is it? Number of bottles of beer. Get lyrics is lines clear. You have a array list, and you make it reusable, so it's a flywheel, and you basically add it, concatenate it, and you add lines saying how many bottles of beer on the wall, describe removing 1 bottle from the wall, add lines saying how many bottles of beer on the wall once we decrement by 1, and describe restocking the beer on the wall, which is the final line. So I like the wordiness of it. Yeah. This is very much BDD. It's much more Gherkin. Yeah. But again, not expressing that the behavior of the system, which is the song has a rhyme, there's an echo, there's a right. So we're not in the lyrical space. We're still very much in the technical jargon of the solution. But I like the refactor.
That's interesting. That's something I never get to in my solution, even though I was thinking that like the first part of the first line kind of matches the second part of the second line, as you've said. I never get to that point.
Yeah.
Now, I did factor out number.
That can only happen if you're pair programming with somebody who is a domain expert and he forces you to do so in the task plan initially. Otherwise, the engineer will immediately go to where do I put my arrays? Do I do it with recursion? Is it iterative? Is it 1 first and the exceptions are the plural case? Or is it plural first and the exceptions are towards the end? Right? Because that's already too technically charged. And on the testing desiderata, the quality list, that is immediately what gets you on the wrong road for high composability, for high clarity, for high readability, right? This is why it's really important to pair with somebody who's a little bit less technical than you, who has maybe spent a little bit more time with the user than you. Because otherwise it just becomes a coding challenge, right? We don't want all functions, all features to be a coding challenge. We wanted to speak something of the domain. The domain here is song, so we're thinking verse.
We want
lyrics,
to create value for
stanzas.
actually
What's the
target
chorus?
groups.
What's the chorus? What's the bridge? What's the echo? What's the rhyme? What's the action? What's the right? So there are lyrical contexts here, and I didn't know. I asked ChatGPT. It's like, hey, what lyrical nouns and verbs can I use in this context? And ChatGPT gave me, verse and bridge and echo and chorus and rhyme, right? So the more you can incorporate that.
If you have that domain knowledge, then incorporating the domain wording and knowledge into the program makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. And if you don't have it, you end up with something like this, and that's also fine. But it's going to be harder it will make it more structure sensitive, right? So it will make it a little bit less behavioral and a little bit more implementation driven. That's why this is so important. That's why so much of the composability happens before you even write your first tests, just by thinking about the problem. That's why we spent so much time last time writing the testing plan. Can I jump to the last commit? Was there something you wanted to share?
What inspired me to make this a class with instance variables there is that when I had it just as functions, I had to pass a number of things into each function. And then for that second line, I was passing in the number of bottles of beer, and then it was subtracting one and returning the smaller number of bottles of beer and then doing an assignment. And I'm like, man, we're just passing this data to a whole bunch of different functions and then getting a return result and updating our local variables. And this is what an object should do.
Yeah.
We fundamentally have a state, which is
locality,
bottles of beer on the wall.
I'm sharing state. Yeah.
And
there's a direction to the state change.
We have this array list that we're building the song into, which is state. And so that really screams object to me.
Awesome. Okay.
So I like that you, Jeff. I wish I'd asked for that.
Yeah.
And in writing my own tests, this is not like a rule, but it more like maybe a rule of thumb, like similar functionality, passing state, things like that, encapsulate it.
Yes.
That should be a class.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So don't make it bleed out. Can we go to the last example, Jeff?
Yes, there's one more test for 2 bottles of beer. And this which will fail. And then there's really one more small change, which generalizes the whole algorithm.
So you added 2 bottles to the plural case. You extended it to make it, I believe, general. So not just 2, but also 2 plus. And then you wrote the end-to-end test to make it cover the entire, to force you to write the loop.
Yeah, I think something happened here in that some of my versions got overridden because I did write just the 2 tests.
Yes, so you gave me 3 pastebin links.
Yeah.
And the last 3 were the same. So
I lost them. Yeah.
Yeah. So
what I did was, if it equals 2, do those 3 lines. If it's greater than or equal to 1, do those 3 lines, and then the 0 thing.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of duplication.
A lot. I can see
so
how
at
much.
That point, I'm like, I need a loop.
Yeah.
And so I put the loop in, and that's what you see in the code here.
Awesome.
Then I added all those other tests.
Yeah, and Jeff, you will be happy to see that. Mark, you will be happy to see that Jeff actually followed your suggestion, and he did actually extract the general case.
Yes.
The default number of bottles of beer. There's the general case on the walls test, and then there's the lyrics, lines empty, while true, and then you break. Again, this can be refactored. It does handle the general case very well. And then you basically have what we called verse first sentence and verse second sentence. You say, describe removing 1 bottle from the wall. Describe restocking the beer on the wall. And basically this get lyrics, this internal function you could also have extracted. And this is your verse, essentially, right? So you're looping and say, hey, add line saying how many bottles of beer on the wall, and then describe this is your verse structure, right? Which you've lost. You had it, but you lost the general case of the function, which is interesting, right?
Yeah.
And then this is the template thing that we did. Decrements, good. So you're following normal structure. Me personally, just seeing Java on the screen, I'm just not well versed in reading Java like this. And then it just makes it very difficult for me to sort of reason about, because I'm ending up scrolling right all the time. But it is a good solution. I just wish there was a test that didn't require the end-to-end test for you to enforce that the entire lyrics were honored correctly, right? Because I believe you ended up unit testing everything, and then there was something about the loop that wasn't unit testable, so you end-to-end test covered it. Is that correct? Like, am I mischaracterizing the?
No, well, adding this test is just to say, well, the business asked us to produce a 99 bottles of beer on the wrong, so I assert that it does, and it passed. I put in the test and it passed.
Awesome. I'm happy to extend. If you guys have to leave, it's okay. I just have a third example, because I've been monologuing on the test qualities, and I just want to show an example where I followed a little bit, have an academic example to show, right? So I just want to show an example of what it would look like. And thank you, Jeff. Jeff, I didn't ask for the code example. You were coding with us live last time, and I just wanted to give you, first of all, to appreciate you, to really thank you for actually following along and coding along as we were having the stream, and thank you for your courage to actually join us live on stage.
And thank you.
This just makes it so much more special, at least for us.
Go ahead.
So I have a second one here, which is 99 bottles solo, but I should have named it 99 bottles. 99 bottles Dennis. I did the same thing Jeff did. I started off initially with an end-to-end test to test my naivety. I wanted to see, hey, am I doing something wrong here? Am I misunderstanding what's going on? And I just want to show the history of this folder, because I also followed the same thing. Jeff inspired me, actually, and then I did the same.
I considered the end-to-end test, but I was thinking a lot more in testing independent elements of what we're building. You know, so that we had the flexibility. And I think that, Jeff, you were probably here last week. My mind is thinking about, well, it's 99 bottles today, but it's going to be 101 tomorrow.
Oh my God, I can't find it. Like, where's my kid's history?
And I think me and Jeff have both been doing this a long time. We don't expect things to stay the same. So you are very defensive in your approach.
Yes. So I started off, this was my testing plan. This was my testing plan. I said, the song is structured with a repeating verse form. It has verses with 2 sentences. The first sentence has the bottle section and its rhyme. The second sentence has the action and the new bottle section. Refers to a specific number of bottles in each verse's first sentence. Decrements the number of bottles in the second sentence. Repeats the previous verse's second sentence in the following verse's first sentence. Styles the 0 bottle action with a special bridge section. It styles the 0 bottle section as text, no more bottles. So it captures also the plural case of no more bottles rather than no more bottle or no bottle.
Nice.
All non-zero verses decrement the number of bottles in the second verse, right? So the last one doesn't. The last verse with 0 bottles finishes with 99 bottles in the second sentence. Detail, each sentence starts uppercase. Detail, verses are separated by an additional new line. So I added that little nitpick and mentioned that, hey, this is a nitpick. If we are lyrically putting it together into a string, I want this extra new line to be here. So it forces me to. This is my testing plan. I committed it. There's no code. That was my first commit. Then I followed zombies based on Jeff's recommendation. I add, okay, what's the 0 case? Well, the 0 case is saying, hey, give me the last verse. And I said, okay, no more bottles of beer on the wall, no more bottles of beer. Go to the store, buy some more, 99 bottles of beer on the wall. So I just had it return a string, and it's like inline, new line, and static text. That's my sync function. And and the test, which is basically I expect the 0 verse 0 to match this, and 0 verse 1 to match the second line. But I haven't actually extracted the arrays. I have turned the string into an array only for the purpose of the test. I saw that this is a stringly typed problem, so I follow the original instruction, which is just produce a string, and then I convert them with a helper, similar to how Jeff did it, but I do it the other way around. I start with the string, and then I split the string apart into what I need, and then I basically added language into my helper to help me use the language I want to use in my tests, and then see when that helper makes sense to sort of move from the helper object to the actual thing, to the sync function that creates the lyrics. That was my sort of level of extraction that I sort of saw that I would need. And see you later, Grant. I just saw your comment. Thank you for rolling with us for the entire duration. That's awesome dedication. So I just said, okay, I will need some arrays here. I don't want to do like heavy like regex, but I do want to honor this idea that there are lyrics involved. And for the first case, I actually manually checked, hey, does it end-to-end test against the last line? Right, so I had it pasted in, and then later on I extracted. Okay, that's what I started with. Then I refactored it. Then I said, hey, I'm like super specific here. I might not actually want to test everything. So I said, okay, well, I have the 0 verse first sentence, and the zero verse first sentence is this, and then I'm seeing repetition. So I'm adding language, right? So I'm adding plain English back into the variables because I didn't know what they meant. There's the 0 things here, the 0 things here. I was using my editor. Select, introduce variable, refactor, extract. Then it moves from here to here. This is just a very simple refactor commit. Next thing, I split the test. I saw that my test could actually fail for different reasons. So I said, hey, it's not actually fair to test left and right, bottom left, bottom right, top left, top right. So I said, hey, my tests are actually a bit naive. They can fail for many different reasons. So I saw that I actually bit off too much of the pie at the same time, and I started splitting the tests apart because they were covering too much. So one test actually covered 4 different types of behavior. So I wanted to split the test apart to make it a little bit more clear which rules they are enforcing, so they don't fail for the wrong reason. Similar to how we did with Mark regarding, should the period be included or not included? And then I saw, okay, well, I'm testing bottles and the comma and the echo and the period. So I just, once it was working, I just split the test apart to really focus on composability. So each test only really tests against one thing. And then I kept doing this for a few more rounds. And then I said, okay, well, there's a sentence structure. Right, so I did the same thing here. I said, okay, it should match. It should just contain what I'm really looking for. So then when it doesn't contain this, it'll fail. And then I ran into the same problem as we did with Mark, which is the singular case is contained in the plural case. And then that's when the regexes started hitting. And I did the same thing for the 0 case. In my helper, I just said, look, the 0 case is when I split my text according to the double new lines, and I take the last element and I split it by new lines. I was very naive here. I just said, look, it's going to return a string. I'm assuming the string will have this structure, and I need this structure split up according to these rules for me to reason about them with the language that I've chosen for the tests. That was my helper function, and this commit is basically just me changing the phrasing, saying, hey, I am changing the phrasing for my 0 case because I actually don't want to test the entire line. I just want to test that it contains no more bottles. Right? So it's composable. This one checks, hey, does it have go to the store? Yes. Does it contain no more bottles? Yes. Does it contain 99 for the other case? Yes. Good. Perfect. Then I continued from here. Then I added the rhyme structure. This one was a bit difficult because I had to say, hey, I have a 0 case, but that's silly. That's only checking the last line. So I added a generic case. I said, well, I should be able to look at the verse and say, hey, what's the verse for, what's the second verse? What's the 99th verse? What's the first verse? I wanted to have this language. And I said, okay, I'm going to say the 0, the last one, and the at index. And then that's basically the same thing. I'm splitting the verse. And I said, okay, When I'm singing, the first verse is, again, zombies. This is, oh, one bottle of beer on the wall, one bottle of beer, take one down, pass it around, no more bottles of beer on the wall. Same thing, double new line, very much stringly typed. I'm using the helper to create the array. I realized that some of my testing plans are not helping me, so I started skipping them. I actually ended up not using all of my testing plan. It turns out that I had like 9 things in my testing plan, and 3 were enough. And then I split up those 3 because I was too chatty in what they did. I created a generic case. I said, look, for each case, so 0 is the first sentence, 1 is the second, and -1 is the last one. I went a little bit technical here. So I said, once you get the whole array, once you get the verses of the array split up into the string split up into arrays, check the first line, the second line, and the last line. This is -1 is the last line. Again, maybe a bit too verbose, but I said, okay, so it should have regex. It should say something on the wall, comma, something on the wall, and then it should repeat something on the wall, on the echo. So I made it a little bit more explicit what rule I'm checking against. And that rule has to hold for every verse, not for 0, for 1, and for the last one. Right? Because the echoes hold on all of those lines. Even when it says no more bottles of beer on the wall, no more bottles of beer, the echo still stands, even if there's no number. So that was my only commit here, to really put this rhyme structure into the behavior, because this now allowed me to have composable tests. Then I just connected them, and then I said, well, one of the rules is that it repeats the previous verse's second sentence outro in the following verse's first sentence intro. So I said, okay, the left bit on the comma is the intro, the last part on the second verse is the outro. So I said, okay, that's how they make sense. I split by comma. I say the second part is the outro, the first part is the intro, and I said, hey, the outro should contain the intro, the lowercase intro of the previous line, just to reinforce the rule, right? So what am I doing with this? I'm avoiding having to repeat myself saying 99 bottles of beer on the wall, 99 bottles of beer, right? So I'm making my helper stringly typed, but not my tests. My tests are actually speaking the lyrical language as best as I can as an engineer. But it does have some engineering detail in that there's an array here, and I haven't cleaned this array mess up, and there's this -1 concept that is not speaking the language of the domain. But this is the level of detail that let's say I was comfortable with, because I had to make it a little bit messy in order to make progress. And that's the
for me, it is very hard to read for me.
This one, yes, this one I agree. Yes. Because the very next thing, the very next
looks a little bit like compiled code for me.
It was. The very next line, I refactored this bit. But I think this bit actually stays to the end, because I might have, had you been with me on the pairing, I would have said, you know what? Yes, I agree. This is actually very hard to read. Let's simplify it. And I would have extracted a helper here. So the very next one is refactoring. I simplified the sing. I said 99 bottles of lyrics. I have a private text. 0 is this. @ is this. I'm creating a class. Again, following the same inspiration as Jeff. I saw that this had some kind of context. It had some kind of state. They're reiterating. I just want to go over this. But I did so in the helper. My sing function still returns a string. But now I made my string function structured like this. I said the verses of the string are an array, and it has the 2 bottle case, 1 bottle case, and the bridge. The bridge is what I called the last line, which bridges this song to the next one, should you want to repeat it. Then I said join these together with the verse separator, which is double new lines, which is the detail that I decided to adopt for brevity immediately in my tests. This is the only change. That thing that Adrian commented on is still here, and I wish I had done that sooner, actually. But I keep noticing now that I'm super deep in the code that actually I don't need all this testing plan. I created a lot of testing plan, but actually a few of those testing plans have given me a lot of detail to work with, and it was enough. Now it's sort of rubbing at me. It's like, will I need to do all of this? This doesn't make sense anymore. So I caught myself over abstracting already in the testing plan. We're almost done. Yeah, it's super common. Yeah, and I was aware of that. I was even aware that I was trying not to do this. And then I simplified it down. I said, you know what? I'm feeling very brave. What happens if I just generate the case for all the other lines? I said, okay, let's add a test. I said, well, it has 99 verses. Well, if it has 99 verses, then if all the other rules are correct, then the first verse will have 99 bottles, right? So if I'm constructing it bottom up with zombies, then if it has 99 verses, then the first one has 99. I just simplified it down to that degree. Because I am counting them the opposite, right? Because I am counting them based on the verse, not on the number of bottles.
Wouldn't it be 100 verses?
So I specifically said that I have 99 verses and a bridge.
Okay.
Right.
And
so
okay, that's
my helper is structured as a verse and as a zero, which is the bridge.
Okay.
Again, I was a bit inconsistent with the zero naming and the technical naming. That came in the way. Yep. A pairing partner like Adrian, like yourself, like Jeff, would immediately pick up on it and would have immediately made it even simpler. But then I saw that, hey, this sync function now reads top to bottom. Here's the 97. Here's the special 2 case. Here's the special 1 case. And here's the bridge. And then I joined it all together in a string. I said, hey, is this enough? Like, do I need to code more? Because I figured, did I cheat? Like, I didn't actually code the same level of composability as my tests expressed. And I was a bit astonished here, because I didn't expect to be able to stop coding here. Because, look, I have all these to-dos. I didn't write these rules. Right? So I thought I overgeneralized, over-abstracted on the rules. And then I just ended up, halfway through the exercise and seeing, I don't have to continue. And then I refactored. I moved it to its own file. Once I knew that I was happy with the structure, I moved it to a sync TS, and this is my implementation. And I extracted the common templates. I think, Mark, you were going to do the same thing, right? So I said, pass beer around is this, buy more beer is this, the verse has this kind of structure.
Yep.
The verses are 97 repetitions of this, of 99 bottles, 99 bottles, 99 bottles minus 1. And 2 bottles is this case, 1 bottle is this case. Right, so 2 bottle is verse, 2 bottles, 1 bottle past beer. 1 bottle case is verse, 1 bottle, no more bottles past beer. And the bridge is no more bottles, 99 bottles, buy more beer. So I figured, hey, at least in this bit, I'm going to speak some domain language. Then I just joined them together.
Okay. So
this was the last
commit?
Step.
Okay.
Yes, this was a refactoring step. And then the very last commit, I generalized the verse structure. And that was, I believe, hang on. So this was the first version, and the last commit was this extraction.
Mm-hmm.
The last commit, I just deleted everything. I generalized, I extracted out the verses, and I refactored the tests. I basically removed all the to-dos, which were nonsense. I overplanned. I didn't need all that. And then I should have also simplified the helper function, and to make this a little bit less mechanical. This was very mechanical in hindsight.
That seems a little brittle to me, honestly.
Yeah, but the point is here that even though it's brittle, it's brittle not on the public interface.
Exactly.
It's brittle on the test helper.
Yes.
So at least I'm aware that I made it sensitive, but not to the implementation.
Yeah. I'm always thinking from the strategic layer, which we will talk about next week, of course. Especially for juniors, this is a hard test to be able to maintain. So I wouldn't do it like that, to be honest.
I just wanted to really go all the way and see what we could end up with. There are some linguistics in there in that I figured, would it make sense for me to use non-trivial regex? because this is a stringly typed problem. And I figured, would that be easier to read? And I figured, no, that would be harder to read. So I said, okay, let's just not use the harder regex parts. Let's make the test simpler to maintain by just using the simpler regex parts and then using the test, contain and second element, those instead.
I would like to do another thing just for the ending now, just the last 5 minutes maybe. I have in meanwhile, when you had your stuff, I asked our good friend and successor AI to do that as well, and I would give you the results. And you, as 3 engineers, could give your idea about what the AI actually have done.
I love that. Okay.
And just
where are you gonna share? Are you gonna share screen or are you gonna?
I share screen. This is easier now.
Okay.
I don't want to push that, to be honest.
Awesome.
Present. Share screen. It is like, where is it? It's not Chrome tab. It is.
Any comments, by the way? Because I went super monologue-y on that last bit.
Just a bit.
Well, just one thought. I think you almost made an argument to not make a test plan beforehand. You said that you did overwork the test plan significantly, which is a kind of a waste. And just following the zombies thing leads you to a pretty good solution, a quite good solution.
Agreed.
Simpler and more directly.
I saw how much overlap you and I had just by following zombies without needing a testing plan. The issue is that sometimes, 99 bottles really lends itself well to zombies. Sometimes the problem is hard in a way that it might not be obvious what the zero case is. In this example, it was super trivial, but sometimes it does. It's not clear, it's not obvious, or at least the developers might disagree on what the actual zombie, the zero case is, what the one case is, etc. Especially if there's optionality involved or similar practices. But it's a very good suggestion.
In this case, I found 0, 1, 2 covered the whole thing. In more complex functions, I find I need to go to higher numbers. And then for realistic real-world cases, then you start getting into, there are thousands of cases and all kinds of boundary conditions. So there's the B of zombies.
That's the B, yeah.
Boundary conditions.
Yeah.
So, and exceptions, which is the E of zombies.
So what I would like to... Yeah, sorry, go ahead. No, I was interrupting you.
I just finished,
Okay.
There's the E.
Awesome.
So
this is ChatGPT?
This is ChatGPT result. I gave the...
So it's going from 99 down to greater than 3. So I think that's similar to all of our solutions.
That's what you did.
Yeah, that's what I did as well. I like how it simplified it down to 3 lines of code. I had the array map and my linter automatically split it up into new lines, which I also didn't enjoy, but it is what it is. It
doesn't play too much. It doesn't play too much with functionality. It takes more the static approach, right?
It took a very static approach, so it didn't do zombies. It just saw the static bit and said, well, the first bottom lines are static, so I'm just gonna make them static. So I think the machine solved it in a way a machine would, without understanding the essence of the song. But that might be a mischaracterization. But it's a nice example.
But it's actually creating the correct result, so it's not wrong.
Yeah. I mean, all of our solutions are creating the correct result. Even Mark's suggestion to just return the original lyrics at the beginning was a good intuition, and that would also solve the problem.
I just want to say that this is a really great example of the problems of AI right now. And I describe AI to most people as, you've probably seen it quoted on LinkedIn if you follow me. I consider a lot of the AI right now to be little more than a chess algorithm looking forward in time on crack that's trying to deliver a result to make the human shut up. And that's exactly what you got here. Yes, it passes. Yes, it's correct. Is it flexible? Is it brittle? Is it this? Is it that? Is it static? There's a lot of flags in there that I'm not in love with. Now, if you just need to pass this really quickly and just get through an exercise or whatever, this is the way to do it. My approach is overly thorough. I think in terms of plurality, flexibility,
Yeah.
How am I going to interface with this? I do have in the back of my mind internationalization all the time.
Yeah, Mark, I just wanted to say that if we had to translate it, so if we were doing the kata with a backlog in mind, right? So an architectural hint that in the next few sprints we will focus on changing this aspect. If in the backlog we had internationalization, I think your solution would have been, your approach would have been the closest to the one where we would distill it down to its lyrical structure.
I was working on what's called the Rumsfeld paradigm. You may not be familiar with it. I think Jeff might know it. It's an American phrase. He's not my favorite person in the world. We had I think he was Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, and he made a famous speech.
Okay.
And he talks about known knowns and known unknowns. It's the unknown unknowns. That's where I think.
The unknowable unknowns, right?
Unknown unknowns. Unknowable things that you do not know yet.
Yeah.
So when I go in here, I think, well, plurality is something that I'm going to address, because that's a great place for absolutely simple failure. I think of in my interview questions and in my interfaces, both as a junior and a senior, I'll change this one number and the whole thing's going to break. And I know how to do that. And Jeff does too. Dennis, Adrian, all of you know how to do that. So I did come from a much more thorough side, which slowed us down. But I think it may not be the perfect style.
This was not about speed. Our intention here was not about speed. Our intention here, and I want to reiterate, was deliberate practice, right? And so we wanted to deliberately practice. Yeah. So, but our practice was about how to design the test for composability and other qualities. So I neglected readability slightly to focus on composability, because composability is what I wanted to highlight. How did ChatGPT create the tests?
Wait a second. LinkedIn user says, for me, the best approach is from ChatGPT because it's doing what it should. This is what I wanted to quickly say as well. I have now the strategic aspect again. I know Mark is a little bit more talking about the product owner who is thinking about the future of the product. And but I combine it now with Dennis. It's a song. It won't change.
Yeah.
It won't change. Requirement is hit. Quality is marked. And we need to go on some point. And the complexity... It is the complexity.
Dynamic,
the complexity of this part of code is so low that we can exchange it and extend it later. So it doesn't break any form of design principles. We can start slow in the agile way, then reiterate later, and we can add later, because the if the test, and now we're going to the test, is basically not fulfilling that, then it would be wrong. But the code itself does what it's supposed to be. There is no, because this was the input.
I would challenge that. However, because look at how it's structured. It returns an object with a curried function that has another inline function inside.
Ignore this. This was just ignore this.
No. We can't ignore.
You need to ignore this because that wasn't the AI. I just assembled it really quickly into a function. So ChatGPT, it wasn't ChatGPT. It was JetBrains AI.
It gave you the closure on line 2 till 6.
Yeah, exactly. So and I needed to just I told it to merge it with that function because that was already prepared for you, and I had no time.
And I see that it's implicitly typed, so I assume it produced a JavaScript solution, not a TypeScript one. The types from the TypeScript, that's inferred, right? That's what you did.
This is how it came. So it was TypeScript. It was
TypeScript. Okay. And what about
since it's JetBrains API AI, it does know the code base.
It's not about the code. It's about a test. How did they structure the tests?
Now let's go to the test then.
Okay.
Let me quickly take a look if we can make this a little larger, so it should be readable still. So let's go, guys.
You made it larger.
Bash it. Come on, do it.
Right, so the composability part. So I like this idea of checking the last element. That I like. It should have correct last lyrics, so it didn't go 99 or whatever. It said it actually literally went to the last element. I wish it had used the more modern result at. So I like that part. I don't like that it neglected the composability aspect of the test. I don't like the ESLint disable next line, no magic numbers like that. Like that to me, this
That's
is me.
I
That's
just
you.
yeah.
Oh, because it didn't know your linter that you would have in the editor.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I'm not gonna look at that.
I shouldn't have changed it. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So what did it do? I think it took a similar approach to my decomposition. So I see it stringly typing, and then 99 minus middle lyric index divided by 2. So it's checking odd and even line numbers. Is that what it's doing?
In which line are you
29. 29. Middle lyric index. So it's a bit mechanical.
It's odd. It's odd number. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the even for the even number. I don't think a human would have written it like this. I don't think it captures.
Oh, actually, I use that modulo quite a lot, to be honest.
No. I mean how the test is structured. Like it should handle middle lyrics correctly. I don't think
I did that in my very first thing 2 years ago. I did that like that. I remember that.
No, not the middle lyrics. But just to use the term middle lyrics. The structure is sound, I think, but the repetition is not captured.
Yeah. So actually, okay, it is basically the that's the repetition.
I wouldn't favor having an if statement in a test. Let's put it this way. These are two tests. I wouldn't have passed this with flying colors. An if statement inside around an assertion, I think, would be an anti-pattern. I wouldn't have. I wouldn't let a junior commit code like this.
There's something that.
But it's a prompting problem. I can prompt ChatGPT to fix this, right? So that's again. But then the problem is, am I coding or is ChatGPT? Jeff?
Something that bothers me about this part of this test is that this code is more complex than the code that it's testing. This is an algorithm, and it's more complicated than the thing it's testing, which really bothers me.
I also went this approach, right? Because I figured describing the strings and the structure of the song will probably increase complexity in the test helper. And Jeff, you yourself, you're also using a test helper, right? So you have an assertion helper. So there was you had an assertion helper for comparing arrays, right? So there is an element of this, but I would agree I wouldn't inline it like this. I would make it a little bit more human friendly, even to the degree that even just in these two places, I would have extracted it. And well, again, it's not following what I would call sound. So it's not on the test Desiderata. It's violating the rule of specificity, right? So tests on line 38 will have a lot of reasons to fail. And again, you can prompt it. Well, because it has many different assertions. There are many rules being enforced.
Okay.
Right, so all of us in spirit followed through on the test to be a little bit more wordy than necessary, because if a human doesn't follow this test, I could have just created a string, here's the full lyrics, song returns this string, and test, I could end-to-end test it and just return a string, and it would have betrayed the spirit of the kata. So I think ChatGPT violated slightly this aspect of deliberate practice, but it's hard to judge because we haven't asked it to do so.
And now to the guests, would you say that ChatGPT is today already a viable tool to help you doing those things or not? If you see that,
I would not use it.
No. This is not the question. It is now the professional opinion, not the personal one. It is about, would you say that the result would pass in a TDD scenario? So would you actually say, okay, this could be committed?
I would not pass it.
You know why I wouldn't pass it? And this is an interesting one. I wouldn't pass it because human didn't write it. Human didn't maintain it. Okay.
I mean, a human did prompt it, so there's that.
A prompt is not the same thing. If I tell you to build a house, I don't learn how to do plumbing.
Well, even if a human had written this or claimed to write it, I would have real problems with this modulo 2 part, because it's essentially generating the song. Like, this is code that generates the song in order to compare the lines that it generates to the lines that the other code generates.
Yeah.
Like to me,
It's
this
bad.
looks like it was written by an engineer who didn't understand the difference between the behavior and the implementation. That's what this looks like to me.
Yeah, this is another implementation.
Yeah, it's another implementation. So it
Well said.
basically created two implementations and comparing them with each other.
That's a good point.
Which is actually a technique that I use, but in the tests I always use a substantially simpler implementation. So it's a valid technique, but not this way.
This is closer to smoke testing, actually. But I wouldn't pass this with flying colors for unit testing, for composability, for clarity, and definitely not for precision, right? Because the tests are not specific enough. You know, when I have a test, it should correctly handle the last 5 lyrics. I expect the test name to tell me what the correct way is. Again, this is a very contrived example because it's a static lyric. But imagine that it's not static. Imagine that it's just static from the context of one user, but there are rules and regulations of why it is this way for this context and this way for that context. I would expect the pros, if you run the tests and you get the nested, it does this, check, green. If I read the tests, I would expect to be able to extract what the business rules are, which with ChatGPT I can't. It's pretty. It has a very, you know what it looks like when you showed me, Adrian. It has a very stable entropy, right? So the text of the test names have very stable entropy, so they're very pleasant to read. Can you show us the terminal again? The terminal when you run the tests. The ChatGPT does this a lot, and you can spot somebody who uses ChatGPT. You see how it's a stable entropy? Like it just uses the same kind of language, same kind of spacing. All the words are about the same length. ChatGPT will constantly do this because that's how it's been trained to average out English speech. And it produces texts and tests which are very pleasant to read, which might bias you to give it a better grade than it actually deserves. And that immediately triggered me at the beginning. I was like, this is really sexy to read, but hang on, am I gonna judge it unfairly because of that detail?
ChatGPT is a tool for software developer. The developer creates code with the tool and have to choose what code he is using for his composition of code. If the code is logic for the developer and the requirements then push the code.
You know what I would do? Go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead.
And the actual results of that, as people have been doing that and measuring it, the actual results have been that the quality of systems goes down.
Yeah. You know what I would have done here to avoid that exactly, Jeff, is if a junior developer had came to me with the candor and say, I don't know how to test this. I don't know how to separate out implementation from behavior. I don't know how to make it more composable so it doesn't fail for the wrong reason. And I also don't know how to implement it in TypeScript. So here's what ChatGPT produced for me, and here's what my prompt was. If I get that in a commit message, I would say, okay, fair. And I would review the prompt. And I would help them prompt ChatGPT better next time so that they can also learn something about what the prompt did, what the code differences are, and basically learn from that experience. Like if we had that entire, actually ask somebody to and encourage them and support them in doing this as a learning exercise in the spirit of deliberate practice, I would want to see the prompt in the commit message. This was produced by ChatGPT. This is what I prompted it. These were the pre-prompts. And then I would review the pre-prompts and say, hey, I would do this and that, but maybe you don't need to write it yourself if this is beyond you. Try prompting ChatGPT this and see if it makes the result. Or try experimenting with these prompts to follow through on what would have it pass for my review. But I would only do that in like a weird contrived example. I would prefer to pair program with this person so that they wouldn't have to pair program with ChatGPT.
Can I ask you a question on that, Dennis?
Sure.
I think you made a great point of like, put your prompts up there, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I play a lot with generative images. I like to throw the prompt of how I got that crazy result.
Yeah.
The question I have right now, and I don't think it's answerable, but it's a dire question. It's one of paranoia and like self-destruction. I don't consider prompts stable.
No, they're not stable. They're not stable.
And that right there is what pulls me out.
I can use the same prompt and I will get a different result. But
Exactly.
the point is, I'm trying to teach the person to prompt better, not to get the result. I'm trying to teach the person the words, like for example, write the implementation in such a way that it follows the composability rules of the test. We're exploring test Desiderata from Beck, try to sort of follow through on the composability rules, so there's very limited duplication in the test code, right? So I'm trying to teach the engineer these words so that they practice using them and don't really care what ChatGPT produces. As far as I'm aware, as long as the engineer isn't confident to do it themselves, I will never pass this commit.
Okay.
Unless it slips somehow, right?
Yeah. AI just represents so much variability. I can't inherently allow that into a larger system.
I have to give it props. It produced the answer very quickly. Right? So I mean, I was sort of doing everything by the book. I went for lunch in between. So it took me a few hours to create the example that I just showed you, right? It even took me like 20 minutes to describe
The question is, we just taken a look at one iteration. So you had, I don't know, 10 iterations per person, and we're looking at one. So we haven't given it a chance to actually correct it. So first of all, when I ask one engineer today for a thing, and I ask tomorrow the same question to the same engineer, it is a different result.
But would
AI is like human; it is not like a machine.
Yeah,
so we need to. Is that so bad? The question.
Because I sometimes I end up having 2-hour conversations with ChatGPT, just constantly reprompting it and constantly iterating on the prompt.
Yeah.
Would it actually be faster at that point, other than just going through the work and writing it ourselves? We saw with Jeff, we saw with Mark. We can quickly write this up. If we're not being distracted by a live stream, if we're not being distracted by comments, we can quickly write this up.
So what I use, so the way I created that was entirely via prompt. But if you use AI encoding these days, it is more following what you actually were intending to do.
Yeah.
So it is more the co-piloting thing. So what we have
context.
Exactly. This is not co-piloting. This is generation. So that means that code was entirely generated. And if we start to generate code by AI, it is basically a no-code solution in terms of the developer, and we shouldn't intervene
That's
here, I think.
not entirely true. This was not a cold prompt. ChatGPT is aware of all of the public projects on GitHub. So ChatGPT has seen all of the possible results of 99 bottles, and it knows the kata of 99 bottles, and it still decided to give us this result. Like, so if I showed you all the possible 99 bottles kata solutions, and I say, I understand you have all of them in your brain, and you give me this, I would be very disappointed. I mean, we have to put credit where credit's due. It saw all the solutions.
I'm not sure if AI is really working like that. It's known everything in the world and can take a look what is actually the best. I still treat AI more like a human than like a machine. I think a common misconception is that AI is a machine. AI is powered by a machine, but it's not a machine. It is a memed human behavior. And humans, even if you read 10 books and you need to do a kata, you will still not do it like it was in the book. It's done by your context in your head. So in my opinion, we should so I of course, this is nothing you want to have. So Jeff was totally right. The entire quality of the system would degrade if we use it just like that. So we could do it like, hey, I'm a coder who has no arms anymore, and I could just use text prompts, and I would be able to do no code with the AI. That would be a viable solution already to do codes. You could just change that.
Or interface problem. Maybe I'm on my phone and don't have a keyboard, and I might dictate faster.
That would be possible.
Faster to the AI than I would dictate code. I try to dictate code, and it's terrible.
The point is, we could, for example, if you would say, for example, this line, we're going ahead and we delete this one now. And I ask another, I take a look if that actually works.
You got it turned on because you're in IntelliJ. I'm not sure if
I don't know. This was now the co-piloting thing. So what happens here now? Should handle the middle part of the lyrics. So it was a totally different approach now. What and are we still? We are still green.
But again, it's not pre-prompted, right? So
no, this was Copilot, GitHub Copilot. This is not the same AI. This is a different AI now.
Vaibhav is with us. He has a question, and I would like us to wrap up the call. Now after this question.
but
7 p.m. But it is bedtime with kiddos.
Just very quickly. So what we've just seen here is a totally different approach, actually.
Yeah. I think now it's iterating on the aspect of undesirable. We already said that this kind of approach to it is undesirable. So we would now have to sort of reverse engineer what it's doing, to reverse engineer what the prompt is. I think a human would just be faster coding it. I would rather have a conversation with you and you say, Dennis, that's great. But that bit there, when you're extracting the arrays, it's a bit mechanical. Can you just name that something? And I'm like, sure, I can name that. Yeah. What is the name for this? Well, that looks like it's the first verse. Okay. Extract helper, first verse, extract helper, second verse, done. And I would rather do that with a human than try 7 iterations of prompts of deleting code, writing code.
Yes, that's true. I think working with AI can sometimes be cool, and most of the times actually not. It is not very pleasant, let's say, and it's really sometimes annoying that it really doesn't understand what you want. So it's entirely different context, and I think prompting is a complex thing, and prompting changes. So prompting in 1 year is a different thing than it is today, right?
One more word, Adrian, that you missed. You had context in there, but there's something that pairs with context in with regards to AI and code. Conscientiousness. You cannot necessarily get a conscientious output from AI. And by that, I mean a senior developer or an architect as you go a little higher up. Like I demonstrated in my struggles here, I'm looking forward or I'm looking backwards at history or problems that we've had. And that's very hard to extract from AI. And that is what makes a superior developer and allows a system to be
that's true,
maintainable and stable over longer periods.
You know what I would hate doing? I would hate doing a junior developer uses ChatGPT, and then I talk to the junior developer, sort of proxying my decisions to ChatGPT. Like I'm helping them prompt. I'm doing that if I'm helping the junior grow. But if I'm just feeding ChatGPT with a better prompt, I would expect ChatGPT to read the code review, and I immediately talk, rather than prompting ChatGPT, I want ChatGPT to respond to my prompt in the code review. So when I'm saying, hey, could you do this and that, I would expect ChatGPT to immediately pick up on it and do it again without going through a human.
Good.
And then the next time, I would like it to remember all of the history of all of our pull requests, of all of our reviews, like a human would, so that I wouldn't have to reprompt it for the same rules, for the same principles, for the same test qualities that I'm sort of aiming at, because it is choosing some baseline and I'm saying, no, I want it to be here. I don't want it to go back to here. I want it to remember that, hey, like these disciplines are important to me. This is a business. This is not just solving code. We're in a business. We care about test composability. I want you to sort of simplify it down according to these rules. And I don't want to have to explain the rules to you every time. Like, that's the annoying bit. Like I constantly have to explain myself to the AI, and I would rather have to have a conversation with a human who is experienced enough so that I wouldn't have to several times. Learns. Exactly.
Damn, three engineers say don't use ChatGPT for testing anymore, and I need to do it myself again. Damn. No, joking. Okay, so let's wrap up. So we had a great session today. More than 1 hour, more than actually.
Let's not say the number because I have to go. I'm gonna.
Thank you for your time and staying up late, you European folk.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Jeff. This is great.
Thanks.
Thank you much.
Thank you, Adrian, for moderating and really to holding the line for the chat example, the coding examples. And you suggested this kata, so thank you so much for suggesting such a great kata. And I think it's time for
it's fun,
kata.
Right? Okay.
It is fun. It is fun. Yeah.
Great challenge.
All right.
Cool. So all together. Let's see you on Wednesday, next Wednesday. Probably we have a session tomorrow, a news session again.
A news session, yes.
News session. So nothing.
Try to make what I can with you guys. At least listen along. I learned zombies today.
Okay, great. So thank you everyone in the audience. We had a lot of participation today, a lot of people still watching. So now people come afterward, right?
The LinkedIn people left and we got like 13 people on YouTube. So I'm not sure if that's a video quality issue.
No, people can go home now. They don't need to stream from their working computers again.
I was watching it. We had a huge shift in the community. I did see your comment, and the last person who commented that we didn't address. Using AI, you're creating the code, you're using the tool. It's not using you. You as a developer using it and creating the code. I hear all the time the AI is writing the code, but it's your fault as a developer for not using the valid generated code in less time. That's exactly it. And sometimes you just need to give up and say, hey, I'll write it myself. Go home.
You need to invert it.
Yeah,
write it inverted. Then we can read it.
I did write it inverted.
No, but for you locally, it's inverted only for you. Like
I wrote it inverted here. I thought I was going to flip it. I was wrong. Sorry.
All right, guys. This was great.
Thanks, everyone.
See you tomorrow and next week.
All right. Be safe.
All right. Ciao.
Ciao.